Budokai's back and PSVR 2 talk. Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I am your host, Brett Beck, and this week you may notice that Chris is not here. Chris is doing his own thing, out working, but we saw this as an opportunity to talk about PSVR 2 in much more depth, which Chris did not end up buying into because he's a loser. I'm kidding. He's not a loser. He's actually been talking about maybe getting it, but it did afford us an opportunity for Joe from the Trophy Room, a PlayStation podcast, to come back and grace us once more as a guest. Joe, I'm super glad to have you back. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing today, buddy?
I am excited to be here. I'll let all the good folks know that I have a killer migraine, but that's not because of PSVR 2. It's because being adult sucks. You know, stress headaches, they're the worst. But again, I'm here to power through so that I could preach about the good word that is PlayStation VR 2.
PlayStation VR 2. It has been a big deal. So, as you may know, we tend to start the show off by checking in on what each other have been playing. But before we get into that, I'm going to let everyone know this will have a pretty hefty PSVR 2 chunk of discussion early on. We're going to kind of onset that into the beginning. We'll use timestamps as we have been, so that if that's not interesting to you, you can skip on and hear the rest, because Joe is joining me for a full-on, full-fat episode. With that in mind, we will eventually getting to talking about Capcom coming back with a kind of showcase of their own. We got Budokai Tenkaichi coming back with Bandai Namco really blowing up the internet with that one. Some Jedi Survivor talk. Some talk about Sony and what's going on with their, I would say, marketing of customizable parts of their PlayStation. But stick around for that. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Chris, so that goes to tell you what happens. Not Chris, Joe.
Force a habit.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it really is. Joe.
Yeah.
I think that we can probably both safely say that the majority of our what's playing lately has been PSVR 2 heavy at the very least.
Oh, yeah.
So I will defer to you, good sir. Let the audience know what you've been playing. What's worth playing right now?
Okay. So let's do I want to start with PSVR, or I want to talk about the game that got me off of PSVR?
Oh, let's do that. We'll roll into VR and let that be a full conversation. So let me take a guess here.
Yeah, take a guess.
Let me think about your Twitter feed lately. I'm going to say probably Wolong.
Absolutely is, dude. Wolong Fallen Dynasty got me hooked with the playable demo that they have, which it really reinforces the idea of bring demos back. For the love of God, bring demos back, because I think you're going to attract way more people than you're afraid to lose by just offering a 30-minute demo of a video game, because Wolong Fallen Dynasty is probably going to be the most accessible, Soulsborne / Neo-like game that you're going to be able to have or be able to play. And I feel like most people will be able to beat as long as you're able to get past the first boss. To me, Wolong is the easy mode Sekiro. I love Sekiro. It is one of my favorite games of all time. It is a game that I've proudly platinumed. And Wolong takes a lot of the philosophies that Sekiro have, which is its dodge and parry mechanic. This game lives and dies by parrying enemies and by breaking their stances, very similar to Sekiro, where strong attacks and special spirit attacks wear down these enemies' stances, so that when you break them, they're dazed and you get to do just bonus damage after bonus damage on them. Wolong does something different, though, in way of scaling level. So you have your base level of what you always have with any From Software or Team Ninja-like game, but for every level, there's a morale system at play. So, for example, I'm a level 30 character right now, and the great thing about this is it's all weapon space, so you get to wield giant maces and also get to do spells, so you're not like trapped between classes. It very much works with you instead of against you. But the morale system works in a way where you're starting at level 0, which means you're going to take bonus damage and you're going to deal less damage to enemies in that level. Now, the more enemies that you kill, the more enemies that you defeat, and the higher level enemies that you go through each level will raise that morale rank. And you also get to raise up little checkpoints as well, like little bonfires to permanently raise your rank. Because if you die, you're all the way back at 0, but you could work your way back up to, level 10 or level 15, or have that just as your set morale rank. If you die, if you just put these battle banners on these checkpoints. That being said,
okay.
Yeah. So the coolest thing about this is you get to raise it as much as you kind of want. So the bosses, their morale rank, I think is genuinely, from what I've seen, level 20. But if you want to grind a bit in that level, you can actually level yourself up to level 25. You could call in bonus allies with you to make the challenge significantly lessen for you. So you can have like a person that's going to tank or a person that's going to heal you to help you get through the bosses. So I found that most bosses in this game are actually relatively really easy. It's just how it really comes down to what challenge you want out of this game. But it really much feels like a classic, Soulsborne, Team Ninja, Neo-esque experience, with the caveat of it's focused on parrying. It's focused on perfect parrying. It's focused on, you building your perfect gauge meter to do more spirit attacks, to call in like these cool ultimate abilities on your foes. It's a really, really fun time. And I just love the way that you get to raise the stakes whenever you feel like it. You want that challenge if you absolutely want it.
Well, the trailers made me think one thing, but before I get there, because I do want to ask you that one, going back to what you were talking about this morale system, it kind of sounds like, and you can hate me for the opinion, and it's not even it's not a strong opinion. One of the biggest issues I had with Returnal is that it's so long, and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, so I don't want to spend long on it, but it's trying to do, and I know some people love it for this, but it's trying to do the iteration aspect of a roguelite. But because of the fact that it's such a dense game, that iteration loop isn't on like 15, 20, 30, 45-minute cycles. It can be anywhere up to 7-hour cycles, depending on how good and how slow you take it. And so anytime that you kind of die and you have to restart from the start, it's like, it feels like, well, if I start a new run, I'm dedicating that much time. It's like, do I want to keep doing that? And so I'm thinking about it at launch, right? Before they added the ability to save and back out. It was, oh man, if I'm in the middle of a run and I decide I want to play Destiny 2 with the pals, I just got to sacrifice that whole run. And that always sucked. But what I always would have thought would have been a cool idea to try and still give you that basic roguelite interaction, but still have the rest. And I know it wouldn't have worked within the story they're trying to tell, but I would have really liked to see a game similar to that, at least approach that, because that game feels amazing. But to where when you beat Frike, right, like the first boss, and you beat him, it creates either right then or at the start of the new area. Once you get to the new area, it's like, this is your new starting point.
This is your new starting point.
Yeah, it's like, and now it's the same thing, right? If you die in this one, you come back to here, but you don't have to worry about Frike in that area again. And you don't have to worry about getting bored of that ecosystem yet again as you try and move through the new one. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is that the morale system is similar to that, and where you're level 0 until you get to a thing. And part of the reward of the bonfire-esque mechanic is that instead of it just being a place to rest and restore and respawn enemies, it's also a physical check mark of like, I've made it. Here's my secondary reward, is I can permanently set my morale to this as a means of that.
That's actually an excellent term, where it's just like, it feels more impactful when you get to a bonfire. Now the levels, vary in length, but they never overstay their welcome either. So like, to me, for the most part, I find like a level is around 30, 40 minutes long. They're relatively short. The paths or the hidden paths, they're not too terribly hidden. So like, you can run around this map rather easily. It actually, encourages you to master the map, find new routes, to find more of these like little pillars that or banners you get to raise. So that's where I feel like it does a really excellent job of executing that mechanic of just like, yeah, no, here you're here, so you don't have to go back to the giant lion that keeps on messing you up. But if you want to go back to him, now you're actually probably at a higher morale rank, which means you're going to be able to do more damage to him. He gets to do less damage to you, and you get to learn how that character actually maneuvers better. So there's so much variety there that, or opportunities rather, that the game gives you.
Okay, I got you. And I do think the secondary question I had,
Go for it.
I think I was working off of a false idea of what I was thinking. And actually, I know for sure it is now, which makes me wonder, what is the game I was thinking of? There was a game that they showed sometime last year, maybe late 21, where it's very Japanese focused, but it kind of has this like Japanese / Assassin's Creed look to it.
Yes, that's another Team Ninja game. It's
so it is Team Ninja. That must be why I'm getting mixed up on it.
Yeah, this is like, it's like their A team, their B team right now. That's working. But yeah, there is a Team Ninja game that's set in the end of feudalism into where they industrialize. This is feudal. This is not even Japan, actually. This is like feudal China. So you're getting
Rise
to see
of the Ronin.
There you go. You're getting to see like mythological characters like Guan Yu in there.
Well, that was the thing. Is like I was watching people play this, and I was like, "This doesn't look like what I remember having that vibe." And because I was thinking it was like an open worldish style game at 1st, and then as people started playing, I was like, "This sounds more like Neo, where it's like you have a vertical area that you can kind of travel through, but then it ends like a mission. So it's not like Soulsborne in the sense that the map is a persistent map that you wrap around back in on yourself. It is like, well, this is a level and you're going to go through, and once you get to the end of this level, it's going to move on.
And you know, for better or for worse, it definitely feels like a peak PS3 level. And honestly, like I miss those like game experiences where it's just like, hey, get to point A to point B to point all the way to Z and have fun doing it. And that's what it really feels like. Well,
did you play Neo?
I played a bit of Neo. Neo was hard as hell. One of the things that I couldn't get with Neo, especially Neo 2, if I remember, is that the dodge button is the cross and not circle, as it should be. So it was really hard for my from software muscle memory to work into those games. But those games were punishing. So I couldn't get into them.
You're talking about the stances, right? And the stances kind of remind me of Neo, actually, and definitely Sekiro too. But Neo actually had like, you would change which stance. You'd be kind of going over arm, or you could go low and you do all your attacks from a different stance. And you would have to look at what your opponent's stance was, and then you adjust up. Like, okay, well, they're in a low, I need to be high so I can break over their stance. And it was almost like this mixture of, and I haven't played For Honor, but I know that this is the For Honor mechanic of, right, you have to pay attention to the stance of your opponent. You kind of see it in a game like Chivalry 2, where it's like, you've got to actively try and play the move that you need to break through what the opponent's doing right now. I like that ideology. Something that came to mind that I almost don't even know if it would work or if a game has done it. But, typically we think about levels kind of linearly, and it sounds like this game does try to eschew that a bit to where you're used to just leveling, and then you keep that level in perpetuity. Even Souls games, right? You lose your soul currency or your blood currency or whatever it be, but as long as you spent it on a level, you don't lose that level. That's fine, and I kind of think that makes sense. But have you ever thought about in games where like there's a lot of enemy variety? Have you ever wondered, and I didn't until just now, so I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't.
Go for it.
Do you think you'd be interested in a game in which you basically leveled up only for what you were fighting? So like a certain type of enemy, the more you killed of them, you got experience fighting that enemy. And as you fought more of them, it was easier. But then when you discover a new one, it's like, even if it's something small, it's just as challenging because you have to learn your way around it.
This game kind of does that. There's like you level up elements. So you got like, shout out to Earth, Wind, Fire, the band, but you got Earth, Wind, Fire, Water, and all those when you level up them, they each have different spells and abilities that you have. So like water is going to be really strong against fire enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Fire enemies are going to be really good against earth enemies. Or I think metal, is the other one. And like metal is very resilient to water, something around those lines. So like if you're dealing with an water enemy, probably want to use earth. Or if I'm dealing with a fire enemy, I probably want to find a water spell that I can use, or a weapon that works better against water enemies or fire enemies, whatever the enemy you're up against. So it does do something similar to what you're kind of speaking to.
Well, I think I kind of got an answer, and I don't know if you're big on it. If I'm not mistaken, did you play Wild Hearts at all?
No, that is one I unfortunately missed.
I haven't played it either. It was just more of a curiosity. Are you a big Monster Hunter guy at all?
I've tried. I've tried so many times.
Well, where I was actually going to go is I think that without telling you, in a weird way, I think that is what Monster Hunter is. Like, right? Because in Monster Hunter, definitely the older games that were much more punishing than the new ones, right? Like for the main campaign, Monster Hunter Rise is probably the easiest Monster Hunter game just out there. Now, it's not as easy as other things. Like I've heard Wild Hearts is more accessible, but it's fairly easy. But the older Monster Hunters and even Monster Hunter World, part of what it is that since each big monster that you fight is kind of its own entity, and that game doesn't really have levels in the same sense as upgraded weapons. Like, so your gear is your level, right? It's like you basically can resist more because you've killed something that required that skill level. So it's a good loop, right? I've killed something bigger, so now I have its parts so I can make armor so I can take more hits. And my weapon is being upgraded, so my weapon has more pieces so that they can do more damage. And it's kind of a cyclical thing. And I think that's what Monster Hunter is. It's just, it doesn't point it out, but the idea is more of a 1v1, like, okay, well, you're fighting a new monster for the first time. And every time you fight it afterwards, it'll be a little easier and a little easier. And eventually you'll know exactly how to take this thing down with no issues. So that's kind of an interesting spin on that. I really like that idea. So, all right. So is Wolong been your only non-PSVR game then, huh?
I'm pretty sure it's been. Yeah. And then the rest is PSVR 2, baby. Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Ooh. Well, I'm going to slide in a very short game that I did play that wasn't VR, and it got me to break from VR. What Remains of Edith Finch is a game that I was really interested in back in like 2016, 2017, before it ever came out, when it was still supposed to be a PlayStation exclusive, before they kind of backed out and Annapurna came in. I remember playing it at PSX, just a little demo, and I thought it looked really interesting, and talking with the devs, it sounded interesting. It came out, time passed. For some reason, I didn't play it. Time just kept passing, and I just never bothered. Well, it was on PS Plus, and I thought to myself, I mean, I've been seeing this game. I've always thought it sounded interesting. A PS5 version just came out. We're doing the trophy competition. So apparently the PS5 version added a platinum and the PS4 version didn't have one. So I did that. It's like a 2.5 hour game.
Okay.
If you've not played it, it's super unique. It is a walking simulator. So it's the idea of kind of moving through a house, kind of Gone Home style and stuff like that. Like everyone's gone to the rapture. Yeah. But I think it really does something extra by not being afraid to just be weird. So in this, the basic idea of the story is that you're a girl returning to your childhood home, and the childhood home has got a legacy back to a family that, immigrated over here hundreds of years ago. And so this family is known for having bad luck. And so what you do is you go through this house where all these doors have been sealed off, and you're finding these little passageways that are built into the house, and you go in and you read the diaries of little things that basically pull you in, and you experience a flashback to one of each several family members, and you get to kind of experience some moment of their life or some weird aspect of something, and it changes the game on its head every time. So like, I don't want to say too much, but whereas most walking simulators, they pull you by story and not really gameplay, this has an odd gameplay element to it where it's like, it's a collection of mini games that are being told to you by way of being experiences of your family. And it really tries to play out and be like, we're going to change how you control here. We're going to do something weird and unique. Okay. And by the end, it's just a really cool story. So yeah, I'm glad I finally came back to it. But man, the bulk of my week, by and large, been that PSVR 2, baby. Been that PSVR 2. Now I know, so we can go off. I know that you and Kyle both got it, correct?
Yep, correct.
All right, and you've both been playing. I saw Kyle's been posting about some platinums for Job Simulator that his little niece has got. Super cool.
So
super
cute.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm sure to some degree y'all been talking about on your show. So anyone who may be over here listening to us, if this is a recycled conversation to some degree,
I ain't overlapping nothing.
It is what it is. You're gonna have to deal with it because I needed to talk PSVR 2 with someone.
God
Joe
bless.
is just Joe is that person. So Joe, first and foremost, what is like your PSVR history, kind of for me and for the listener base who may not be aware of you?
Oh, that's a great question. I've always been fascinated with the tech, and the tech was breaking out when I used to work at GameStop like 10 years back. So I'm talking the first Oculus when it was this Wire City. I'm talking like the first HTC Vive. Remember that? Is this still a thing? Probably is. It is, yeah. It is, yeah. You know, I got to experience those for the first time, and I was like, "Whoa, this is some ground like floor stuff that we're working with. This is exciting tech because it feels as though we are entering something incredibly new that we haven't done since, you know, the 80s or 90s when it came to just video games. You know, like how does a platformer work in VR is way different than how a platformer would look on a TV, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You know, that type of stuff, like just the ideas felt original, it felt fresh. And we're in an industry where we started to see more, you know, iteration than, you know, originality, as it were. VR is the genre that's doing it different. And so for me, I loved VR, but it was never accessible to me until PSVR 1.
Okay.
I went all in on it. I loved that tech, even as it was just an amalgamation of all of Sony's failures rolled into a headset. I loved it nonetheless. And, you know, I loved, Astrobot Rescue Mission. I always want to say Playroom. Like Blood and Truth, those are excellent experiences. And as much as I loved that headset, the support pretty much died relatively quick. It felt like, at least to me, it felt like after a year or two, we kind of gotten to see less and less of, you know, the software at work here. And so when they talked about bringing PSVR 2, I think it was clear to see that Sony needed to go back on some of its original ideas with VR because the light move controller jargon was not great. The camera tracking was awful. And I feel like they saw that the tech that they were working with was too limited to press forward. And that's why they made the PSVR 2, which is to me, as premium gets for VR at the moment. It's everything I wanted, guys. This is great.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask, right? Like, how does it compare against what you had? So that's what's really, you basically answered that on your own. That's good.
And real talk, you know, I own an Oculus Quest or Meta Quest, whatever they call it now. I don't even care.
Quest 1 or 2?
2, humble brag.
I do as well. Yep.
And, you know, for the one problem that we had on the trophy room, thank God I'm with like-minded PlayStation folks, is I did not like how the media was just like, it's the Oculus or the Meta versus PlayStation VR. It's like, no, stop. What are we doing here? It's like we're arguing against like a Toyota Corolla and a Mercedes Benz. It's like they're not in the same class. It's not fair to even pit one against the other. You know, people saying that like, oh, I'm gonna get tied up with this wire. It's like, how much space do you really need, for the love of all that is holy? This headset, man, as much as I enjoyed my Quest, it is so good that to me, I'm just like, okay, Craigslist, we're going to sell this Oculus. I don't need it anymore. I don't need that Facebook blood money anymore.
Well, I have a very limited one as well, right? I came in on PSVR 1, and I was really bullish on it because I thought it looked really cool. And we went and drove 3 hours away to try the demos out when PlayStation was doing those before release.
And were those awesome?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
And I was sold. I was like, this is a cool thing. This is a good idea. I'm liking seeing Sony because like the Vita really ate at me. And I felt like if I can't get a Vita 2, at least I feel like Sony's throwing that kind of caution to the wind energy at PSVR. And, it's interesting. Like you mentioned PSVR 1 support. And I get that by and large, it didn't get as much as it wanted. But I got to give them a little bit of credit because Blood and Truth is 2019. That's 3 years out. Iron Man VR, that's 2020. That's 4 years out. Yeah. Astrobot Rescue Mission was like 2019 as well. One of the best known games for the thing. And that was 2-3 years out. So they tried. And I really even appreciate that like 2020 and even 2021, they had some PSVR 1 focused state of plays, much to everyone else's chagrin. But, the problem I faced is PSVR 1 was outdated technology when they brought it to us, but it at least made VR accessible. Yeah. So you kind of take it for what it is. And one of my favorite games on the headset is Firewall 0 Hour. Amazing game.
Oh, really?
And the PSVR aim controller they have is, my big question to this day is, what are we going to see similar and what are the pros and cons? We talked about that last week about a gun peripheral that's a solid piece versus something that you can hook your controllers on that's a stock that lets you move them out so you can...
Well, funny enough, there is a company that's working on a peripheral that I think I saw the Firewall devs go, mail it to us and we'll give you some feedback.
Yep. And they said that they've confirmed that. So it'll be a stock where you magnetically attach your controllers, the Sense controllers. So I had the same thing, right? I kind of got disillusioned from VR because I bought the first model and I loved HDR and I bought this beautiful TV that I adore, my OLED TV.
That's right. God bless.
I wanted the HDR, and the problem was that anytime I wanted to play it, I had to completely loop all my wires back around because the first model did not support HDR pass-through. Yeah. So I had to unplug a bunch of crap, and it just got more and more problematic. And the cords were never a bother to me. Like it was 2 of them. It was a little thick. It was like, like where we are now, I'm cool with the one. Like, wireless will always be more ideal.
But we're losing so much
in the process.
In that process, we're losing so much visual fidelity, just processing power that this headset can do. Yeah,
right. That's the big thing. Like you talked about the Oculus, and mine is literally I put it in the closet because I haven't played it in a while. I'm probably going to sell mine because the problem I kept having with it is that the Quest as a standalone unit was never. It's like Resident Evil 4. It's like okay, it's a game I play. It is a full scale game, but it's just a reimagining of something I played, and it was good and I appreciated it. But a lot of the games are just like they were still definitely when you weren't plugged into something else, it was just a VR experience all over again, right? It's one gameplay loop that you can play for hours on end, and that's cool, but it's like I want more from the game, and it just wasn't there, and I didn't find it super comfortable. It was weird. At first I was like, wow, this is everything the PSVR 1 isn't. These controllers track so great. These are, the headset, having the cameras and being able to pass through, look through. It's like all of that's cool. And you're like, this is really interesting. And then I got kind of tired of it as a standalone unit. So I bought the link cable because I tried doing the wireless thing that they do where you can wirelessly link it to your computer and you could do PC VR, but it was super inconsistent. So I got a link cable. And I played Skyrim VR, which I tried on PSVR, and it was awful. So I tried it on here. Had to mod it a bunch, but it was awesome. And I played it for about 10 hours, and I was like, cool. And then slowly it was like, but this is still a lot of work. It's like I'm having to go to PC and get all these things set up, and it just doesn't feel as easy as it should. I don't like it doesn't feel plug and play in the same way. Almost every time I had problems getting it to actually link to my PC in the Oculus app. And so I kept getting pulled back, and I was like, so I kind of just dropped out. And then I ended up buying one more Last Hurrah game of Boneworks or whatever it was called.
Okay.
To try on the Quest, and it didn't hit me. So PSVR came out, and at first I don't know. No Gran Turismo 7 at launch. I don't know. This is weird. And I was like, that just seems like, how do you have Gran Turismo Sport, but you don't have Gran Turismo 7? And so I held off, and they kept showing stuff. I was like, that sounds cool. Foveated rendering sounds cool. Oh, that the controllers look cool. And then I was kind of like, all right. And the moment they said GT7, I was in. I was like, let's go. I pre-ordered that day. That day, baby.
Awesome.
They said That's GT7, awesome. And I said, let's freaking go.
You'd even ask the wife, you're like, she'll find out in a month. It's all right.
Well, thankfully, I have a PlayStation credit card, so reward points paid for all this.
Fair enough.
But you were smart enough, I wasn't, to pay for the charging dock, man, for those controllers. I missed out, and they're sold out. I need it.
So that's actually probably so, I mean, if you want, let's talk about this hardware. Because honestly, the only thing that I don't like about the headset is the charging dock sucks. So go try to find a better charging. For $50, these things constantly fall off. I say it all the time. It's like it's prom night. I'm just trying to find where the clicky thing is to click in these chargers so that it stays in place and actually charges. Because like it doesn't have a good feel when you place them on the charging dock that it's actually charging. Like you gotta wait and see the glowing lights and going, okay, all right, it's charging, great, and then like walk away because it has fooled me already like 2 or 3 times. But I think to talk about the negatives of PSVR 2 first, to be a little, spice it up, be a little different, is the batteries of the Move controllers. And it seems like this is just a consistent theme with PlayStation, is shockingly low. So like games like, not even games like, these controllers get around 4 to 5 hours of battery. And you're like, okay, well, that's not bad. Just charge them always afterwards. But not everybody has that charging dock. So you got to charge them probably one at a time for the average consumer. And that gets a little annoying. So to me, I think the biggest knock of PSVR 2 right now has been just the battery life of those Pro controllers are not good. Sense controllers.
We got a lot of questions, and I'm going to kind of work them into this.
Oh, okay, go for it.
I'm glad that you told me that about the charging thing, because do you have the DualSense charging dock for the controllers?
Yeah, I do.
That thing's great. I love it.
Awesome.
It works perfectly. I never have any issues. So I was really surprised whenever I saw the Sense controller charging dock. At first, I thought it was the analog to that, where there's magnetic strips where the batteries are, and when you set it in, it just charges through that because it works so well. And so I was really disappointed when I saw it's just a housing with USB-C ports that you have to click into. And it does feel weird that they would have the foresight to think that the DualSense needs to have this easy charging, but the Sense controllers for the PSVR 2 don't.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an odd, for all the stuff you get right? Because so like positives and negatives, right? You're talking about the positives, you already talked about the negatives, but the positives of the controllers in and of themselves is all of the DualSense features being in there. The haptic feedback is incredible. It feels really good. I really love the sense of the finger tracking, which is not exclusive to PlayStation by any means. I understand, but it's still really nice. But those adaptive triggers, man, they continue to impress me in everything that they're in. And sometimes they're a bit much. Every now and then I'm playing Harry Potter and I'm like, bro, my hands is getting a workout over here. I need to take a step back. Forspoken was like that too. I was like, I need to turn this down a little bit.
Yeah.
But with all that, it's like, how do you get all of that cool stuff right? And then you've already made the DualSense, and you don't think that the Sense controller could just have the same thing with a dock that you just set them in there and the magnets align, and bam,
the fact that it's not magnetic, and like you got like it comes with cheap little dongle like USB-C ports that you tack on them. It's like, come on, PlayStation, be better.
It's rough. But we got a question to that, which I think kind of comes into here. So it's kind of a twofer. Sweet Gran Turismo Jones asks, do you find PSVR 2 more or less comfortable than PSVR 1? And then secondarily, because we've seen this a lot, I've seen people online talking about it to some degree, have you experienced any bugs with PSVR 2 hardware specifically yet?
Bugs on the hardware side, no. I answered that like no, but no. I
have you seen people talking about like apparently right sense controller issues, specifically sporadic connection issues and stuff?
So if I can be real with y'all for a second, anytime that a new piece of hardware comes out, I'm guaranteed that there's going to be the 0.1% of folks that are going to have a dud, that's going to have a lemon. I believe my brother's PS4 was a lemon, I think, not if memory serves right, but like, you know, I always feel like those articles get a boost upward because it's like, if it bleeds, it leads. So no, I have not experienced any bugs or any drifting on any of these controllers so far.
That's good. So as for comfort, you know, you talked about positives, and so far we're talking about features, but you know, comfort is one of the most important features of a VR headset. So how are you feeling about that?
So Kyle and I have differing thoughts on this. I definitely understand with the crown. First off, I always have preferred the crown style, the
halo,
where
the
it
halo
sits
style
on your forehead, right? Rather than just strapping it on your head. It's like
the Quest. I had to buy one that was like the PSVR 1 because it was awful. And I have a big head.
Dude, my head is enormous. So like for me, the one thing that I love is, you know, the accordion style visors do an excellent job, phenomenal, blocking out most, if not all, of the light around you, and being able to play with the how the goggles align to your eyes.
Yeah, your IPD, interpupillary distance.
Look at you with the science. I'm just like, how are the lines of the eyes? And you're like, I'm going to break out some.
I'm so glad that it's a physical dial, because I don't know if you're aware, Quest 2 has this same thing, but there's only 3 positions and you have to physically touch the lenses to push them in. It's awful. And this is actually like you can gradually scale up and back. It's great.
And the awesome thing too is like you can always... It'll always, or like you could go into the system every time you have it, because people are like, "Why are the letters so blurry?" It's like because you're pushing the screens right into your eyes. Like you could back it away a little bit; it's gonna be fine. But like you can make it so that when you align it, you're making sure that it's perfectly aligned with your eyes. So like it'll actually show you on screen where the screens are positioned to your eyes, which is awesome. The whole thing super comfortable, but there is some slippage, right?
See, that's where I was coming, because like PSVR 1, right? If we're comparing PSVR 1 and PSVR 2, which is, I guess that's the heart of the question, right? Do you find it more or less comfortable? I think ultimately the quality of life things, it's more comfortable, right? It doesn't feel like it's putting as much pressure on my nose. The IPD adjustment means that I feel like I can keep it further out and then do the adjustments I want. The accordion setup means that there's a much larger distance of where it'll cover light. And this thing is excellent. And I consider light leakage a huge comfort issue with VR, because it really does break your sense of immersion. And it also makes me nauseous in the ones that don't do that very well, where you can look down a certain amount and you can just see. It's like the disconnect causes me to kind of feel like, oh, like that didn't sit well with me. But so I think a lot of this comes into how have they adjusted the already tried and true Halo, where you hit a button, you pull out, you stretch it over your head. And I think one of the biggest improvements for both comfort and light protection is the shaping of the front headpiece, where it kind of over exaggerates past your head, so that as your head pushes into it, you kind of seal up there. And then I really like this. I don't know if you'd agree, but it's in the back and front. There's like a 2-stage cushion almost. Like it feels like for lack of a better term, I guess it feels like a deflated bike tire.
That's actually a good way to describe it, because I was going to be like a memory foam mattress kind of feel. You know, you got the one layer, and then you got
it's like a half inflated bike tire.
Yeah.
And then if you keep pushing past that, you kind of feel this dense foam kick in, and I find it very comfortable. Yeah. I'd be very curious to see anybody who thinks it's less comfortable in the immediate.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of PSVR 1. Go ahead.
Because he's had some slippage on the back, and it deals with a lot with people like thick hair, of course, or like long hair. And I just told Kyle, listen, stop being gross, go take a shower. No, clean your, and I think it goes to clean your headsets after you use them, because what I feel like is happening, because I've had some sessions where I'm like, ooh, let me take a break, and then I take it off and then it starts slipping and sliding, is your hair's greasy, naturally so. So, after you had a long, session with this thing, wipe it down so that the plastic is, it doesn't have that layer of grossness to it that we don't think is there, but is there.
Well, I'll tell you the secondary. It's the good and bad of halos, right? Where your eyes are on your head. I feel like part of the reason I have a little bit of issues, it's not big slippage. I wouldn't even call it slippage to where I feel like it's falling off of my head, but it's slipping insofar as I play for like about more than an hour, it gets to a point where I have to start kind of readjusting it up. And I think the reason being is for my head size in particular, or for where it sits and where my eyes need to be. The one big missing feature I would really say, and I feel like the PSVR 1 had this, is that the button that you could hit not only allows you to scope in and out, but it allows you a little bit of a tilt of like positive and negative tilt. Yeah. And I don't feel like it feels too rigid on PSVR 2 because sometimes I wish I could get the halo further down past the bump of the back of your head so that it seals and sits better. But then I could make up for that by negatively tilting the screen a little bit so it hits my eyes as it should. Yeah. That's what I find. If I really want it to look as crisp and clean as possible, I kind of have to ride this very interesting line on my head to where, and I tighten it a little extra to help with that. But I can tell that, like, okay, if I do a lot of very physical movements, like if I was doing a lot of Beat Saber or something like that,
if I'm looking real up on Horizon,
yeah, I haven't had that, but yeah, I could see certain games being more problematic than others. So I'd say that's the biggest. If I was going to say, let's 2.0 this baby, right? PSVR 1 got a 2.0 where they changed a few things. If I was going to 2.0 this one, that would be my thing. That button not only slides it in and out, but even if it's a separate button, something to where you have a little bit of negative and positive give, even if it's just a pressure resistant hinge, right? Where you have to kind of activate it, but then once you let go, it's going to stay until you put enough pressure to get it to twist. I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, adding a hinge would be a huge benefit to PSVR 2. Agree.
But on a scale of like Samsung Gear
oh shit
to like a sleep mask, I really do think that this is the most comfortable VR unit I have put on. Absolutely. I have a friend who has the HTC Vive, and I find it almost as uncomfortable as the Quest 2, which I find infinitely uncomfortable out of the box. It was a lot better after I got a halo adjustment for it, but I shouldn't have to spend, that's the thing, like $50 extra for that was unnecessary in my opinion. Right out of the box, you need to be thinking of this product as something that is usable, and I did not find it usable out of the box. It was very tiring. It put all the weight right here and like it was pulling down on your brow. And it's like I don't want that. I want it to really be the back of my head bearing that, and then just like the top of my forehead instead of like the bottom of my brow and my cheek. That's not a very comfortable setup. So Ryan, I'd be curious to see if you asked that because you're having your own comfort issues. But I definitely see how that goes.
It's definitely, for me, this is the most comfortable headset I've used. And just again, the way that you're able to make it for you, right? Adjust it for you is a big plus to me overall. I'm right there with you. This is by far the most comfortable headset that I've put on my noggin, and I've put every single one on except for the Index. I need to find a rich friend with an Index.
Yeah, I haven't done Index, and I'm very curious about it. But it is what it is. I mean, I'm a little curious about MetaQuest 2, but I don't have the Pro 2 rather. The Pro, MetaQuest Pro, is that it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, I gotta have people with money. No, I don't feel like spending that much extra money. No. So far, I would say I've kind of done a smorgasbord. The only thing I've not done in VR that I really wanted to do in VR, and as I told you, I'm getting new windows today and tomorrow, and that's led to some issues. I had originally planned to get home and try a little bit of Pavlov because I've not done a first-person shooter.
I have not either. Yeah.
And so my big question for myself was like, as much as I loved Firewall Zero Hour and other first-person shooter games like Farpoint that had that gun controller, that's a rigid body. So I'm really wanting to see, what does a first-person shooter feel like when I'm holding a rifle that's a two-handed gun and my hands are not physically connected by a rigid body? Like, what does that feel like? Because in my mind, I'm imagining it as it won't compare and it's going to take me out of it.
I saw the coolest thing with Pavlov VR where like they're playing multiplayer. I'm assuming it's just a multiplayer, maybe like team deathmatch. But yeah. And he's walking up behind a guy who's like aimed down sights, and he actually took his hand, waved it in front of the guy's face,
and shot him in the head.
The guy turns around, and as he's turning around, it's like, and pop, pop. I'm like, that is the coolest damn thing I've just seen. VR is awesome.
The coolest I've seen so far, that's one of them. The coolest I've seen so far is a guy ran up on somebody, kind of like juked as they tried to shoot, and he reached out, grabbed the magazine from the gun, and pulled it out.
No way.
Incredible.
That is awesome. VR, guys. Look at this.
Yeah.
Virtual reality, they call it.
Sadly, I did not get to do that, but I'm looking forward to doing it. I did buy Pavlov. So right now I've got PSVR, Gran Turismo 7. I've got Resident Evil 8, which I've yet to try, but I'm very, very excited to, because I think Resident Evil 7 was right beside Firewall, probably the best show of PSVR 2, or PSVR 1 rather, but with the limitation of having to play a VR game with a controller, with a normal controller, which I think ruins immersion. So being able to play Resident Evil 8 and get that same sense of facial emotion, but then start getting that bodily awareness in there. I mean, Lady D is, I can't wait to be, like, I'm a fairly tall person, so she's like what, 8'8" or something. I'm 6'3".
Like I wonder if
I'm probably going to be like right in her bosom. I imagine that if it actually scales from my height in VR.
Well, you know how they're like, hey, place the controllers on the ground to know where the ground is. If you could just lay down with the controllers there, and the game knows that she could just step on you.
You've got
this PG-13 show. Let's do it.
Yeah, you've got it. So I've got that. I've got Gran Turismo, like I said. I've got No Man's Sky that I've tried a little bit of. I've tried Vacation Simulator, which I did not try on VR1 despite loving Job Simulator. I've tried Job Simulator. And then yesterday I finally broke into Horizon Call of the Mountain. So as you've played so far, what has been the most surprising PSVR game for you on PSVR 2?
Oh, man. So I've been dancing around a lot of VR games. I'm going to say the one that surprised me the most is really two games. One is a game that I have played on PSVR 1, but it's so damn good. And the way that they have touched up this game, and it feels incredible. Moss Book 1 and 2. Go out there. Unfortunately, they're not backwards compatible, or they don't have a free upgrade path to them. And
I really would have thought that would have been the ones to do it.
Yeah.
And yet Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator are the ones.
And, they were really awesome when they were talking to us about it on the trophy room like 2 weeks back. They're just like, we really would love to, but we want to keep making games.
I know. It's hard.
That's why.
And Polyarch are great.
It's the only way.
Right.
Yeah.
Moss 1 is a phenomenal game, and I'm very excited for Book 2, but I chose not to play it on PSVR 1 because I knew it would be a VR 2 title. Yes. So I'm excited for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, getting to experience it on PSVR 2, it's the definitive version to play. Go play. It's incredible. The way that the adaptive triggers and haptics just work on that game is stellar. The other one is Pistol Whip, which is so damn good. It is like Beat Saber met John Wick. And it's like,
okay.
It's just like, here's some cool techno funk vibes. Go have shootouts like your arcade style, like House of the Dead types shootouts. But we'll reward you, at least it seems like, if you're just shooting to the beat. So if you're shooting to the beat and you're hitting them like the most accurate way, it'll give you bonus. It'll give you like bonus points. Again,
Yeah.
it seems. I haven't played much of it because, oh my God, it's tiring. They wanted me to dip, dive, and dodge. But like, it is awesome where it's just like, you want one gun, you want two guns. Two guns, style points. You know, turn sideways, kill shot. All those things. It is so much fun. The music's great. It pumps you up. It makes every gunfight feel more exhilarating. And because it kind of has that super hot vibe of just like, hey, the bullets, they're coming at you, but you have time to dodge them and dip and dive. It does make you feel like, yeah, I'm John Wick, just dodging bullets and shooting guys and taking names. And, you know, having that scoreboard there as well. I got to show my buddy Ains how it's done because he's dethroned me on PSVR 2 on the scoreboard. I gotta go back and kick his ass, and it shouldn't be easy. It should be really easy actually. But the adaptive triggers, the haptics there, it definitely feels like I'm shooting something, and it's so funny because like you feel so cool. But I've seen someone tweet out like, yeah, my house cam caught me playing PlayStation VR 2, playing Pistol Whip. I look like a goddamn buffoon. Like, he really is like, it just makes you move in such a way where it's just like after 5 minutes, you do have to put down the controllers. You got to be like, all right, I need a break. This is intense. So much fun. Those have been my two biggest surprises. How about you?
Man, nice. Okay, it feels a little bit of a cheat. I'm still going to say it. Gran Turismo 7 is specifically,
dude.
I wouldn't have thought, right, with the extra layer, I really understated how much having the racing wheel set up with the racing seat set up and the headset on changes everything. So the only thing I'm missing from an immersion standpoint that I really, really want, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it work with PS5 because they decided to not include an optical out as Sony is slowly, which a lot of console, I mean, it's happening in a lot of tech. I get it. But the butt kicker, as they're called, is something that takes all of the low end audio in the game and it converts it into an actuator that just, you put it on the side of your chair and it literally just shoots out of the cylinder and it vibrates your chair. So if you hit a wall, it takes that low end sound from the game and converts it into vibrations for your chair to give that extra sense of immersion.
Dude, that's awesome.
But they already have that. So if you go into Gran Turismo 7 and you go to your VR settings, one of them is that head vibration, right? Which I think is a game changer in a way I never could have anticipated.
I never thought, and it's always so subtle as well. Because when we first heard it, it's like, what, like my head's gonna explode if someone gets a headshot on me. But like, it's so subtle. Like you'll actually, in Call of the Mountain, there's times where you feel a breeze.
Yeah.
Like it's nuts. I'm sorry, continue.
No, trust me. Whenever it actually hit, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. But yeah, if you go into there, initially it's set to collisions only, and it's specifically frontal collisions. But you can go in and you can change it to collisions and impacts. So that way, if you hit a wall, it vibrates your head. And I think that, as well as just having the physical wheel and the physical pedals, it's transcendent in a way that's a little hard to describe. So I had a friend come over. He decided to hop in and he felt it too. And I was like, maybe it's just me and maybe I'm letting my hype get to me. But he was interested in PSVR 2, but he wasn't worried about getting one. And he's not big into Gran Turismo, all these things. So I was like, he's a good test subject. He got in and you know when you're driving in a car and you hit a hill and you're going just a little too fast and you feel your stomach kind of rise?
Yep.
This game replicates that to a T.
To a T. When that first happened to me, I was blown away. So like I've seen a lot of people go, yeah, Gran Turismo 7 is a showcase game. I've played like 5 tracks. Like I can't race in this game to save my life. That being said, the time where I am racing, it makes me a more cognizant driver. So like I feel like I am actually playing better because I'm in VR. Like I'm more aware of the road, if that makes sense. And when you're going down a hill, my brain goes, oh shit. You're about to feel the inertia hit you.
Yeah.
It felt so good, man. I blown away by how impactful and how much VR changes this game.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's always been a great game, but immersion and being able to get someone to go, well, this isn't a game, this is me physically driving.
Yep.
And that's why I really want anyone who can, and I know it's a very hard thing to do, but if you ever have the opportunity to play it on a wheel with that.
Honestly, I thought about it. I thought about it for a good minute. I was like, I think I could do this with a wheel. Because like it was.
Yeah. The problem
crazy.
Chris is currently having is that he's debating getting one because he's looking at some of the games and we game share. So he knows he's like, I'll come in with a pretty large library day one. And so he was like, I could do that. And then he's like, but I'm a little worried that I'll try Gran Turismo 7. Then it'll go into, well, I bought a $550 headset. Well, I bought a $400 wheel.
Yep.
Well, I bought a $300 racing setup. It's
and
like,
for me, it's like, I don't have enough shit in this. Like I have enough. Like I don't like, where am I going to put a wheel? You know, God knows where.
Well, that's the thing. Like in my game room, it's been a pain in the ass because since Gran Turismo 7, it's just been there. But I have the racing wheel set up permanently in there, and it's sticking out in the way. And my wife keeps being like, "Are you going to move this?" I'm like, "No, I use that. You don't touch it." She keeps hitting her shin on it and yelling at me. It's okay.
Par for the course. Yeah, no, it's Gran Turismo 7 is incredible in VR. I want to know for you though, because I know you're a big Gran Turismo stan. You are gonna see it is gonna be like a coming to Jesus moment for you, right? But I want to know what your thoughts are on Horizon Call of the Mountain, because that is the showcase game. I want to know how far in that you got. I've beaten it.
Okay.
So I could give you the intensive review of it for sure, because I got thoughts.
So I played as much as I could yesterday while knowing I had to prep getting my windows all. Sure. I had to move all my furniture away, pull all my blinds down. So I played for about an hour and a half, maybe, and I really wanted to do more. But it's a game that started off not high on my excited list, but I did decide to go ahead and get the bundle because why not? It is built to be the showcase game. Yeah. Then reviews hit for it, and I heard some people saying, "Well, it's like." ACG, who I really like as a reviewer, he's only gotten me wrong one other time that I can really know, where his thoughts on Days Gone and my thoughts on Days Gone are just polar opposite games.
Oh, really?
So, but tends to be that I really align with him. So when he was like, well, it's not an exceptionally good Horizon game or an exceptionally good VR game, I was like, or I think he may have said game. Either way, I was like, well, that's a little disappointing, but I'm still going to try it. I've already got the pre-order. So I've been holding off and I've been playing everything else, right? Like the first time I felt head vibration was in Gran Turismo 7, but the first time I felt it to a large degree because I'm actually a fairly good driver in Gran Turismo. So if you don't collide, you don't feel it. In No Man's Sky, you feel it when you're breaking out of the atmosphere, and that feels great.
I might have to check that out.
Yeah. And then in Vacation Simulator, because at the beginning you're making your character and you can pick up this razor and it starts vibrating your hand. Something you didn't really think about in PSVR 1 where the Move controllers had no vibration. It's like, okay, that's cool. And then because I was like, what's a razor? I'm assuming I could shave my head. And I took it up and my head started vibrating exactly like it feels when you're getting a haircut. And I was like, whoa, this is weird. I was like, this is crazy. And then I went out into the beach part of Vacation Simulator and I was like, okay. And then I didn't even know it at first. My daughter started playing because she wanted to, and she reached her head over into a waterfall and she goes, what's going on? And it turns out, and I tried it myself, that when you dip your head into the waterfall, you feel the water roll across your head. So like if you're partially in, you kind of partially feel the vibration. And if you're fully in, it vibrates a lot more. Yeah. So I was very impressed with that. But it's like I'm going through these games, right? And I'm looking at everything else because I'm like, Horizon will be there. And, you set up eye tracking when you set the thing up, but I haven't used it. No game has really done it other than for foveated rendering. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm done with Job Simulator, done with Vacation Simulator. Gran Turismo 7 is just going to be played for the rest of my life.
Fair enough.
And so I was like, it's time, right? Like I'm wanting to play PSVR. Hogwarts is there, and I actually haven't played Hogwarts all week because of VR2. It's kind of crazy. Same. But I decided to start it up. And man, I have been pleasantly, and I mean pleasantly, surprised in every facet. The only problem I'm having with it right now is I need to go into my settings and up my comfort settings because the ones that it defaulted me to, I really should have went a little above that. I feel like I move too slow. That's it. And I know that there's a comfort setting for that.
Yes.
So hopefully that fixes that. Everything else about it, it looks phenomenal. It's one of the only VR titles that I think gives a very good sense of height.
Okay.
Because I've played other VR titles and none of them have ever given me the feeling of looking over the edge of something and thinking that is actually like a 300-foot down. Yeah.
If I jump, I die.
So the moment that actually got me, and there's all the jokes, and it is a very good joke because my wife was like, "Oh, you're done with Vacation Simulator?" I was like, "Yeah, I moved on to Climbing Simulator."
Yes.
So, I was going through that, and the bow and arrow feels excellent. I think the way that you stow your bow, I think the way you turn and can change your ammo about that, it all feels super intuitive. It all works really well. It looks better than pretty much any VR game out there, including Gran Turismo 7, because, of course, it's made for this specifically. But the moment that really got me, and I think is where it comes into my other surprise game category, that's where I was going with it, is there was a moment where I was climbing, and my wife was talking to me, so I used the pass-through button, turned around, looked at her, talked to her for a bit, got back in the game, and I started trying to climb again, right? And I went to go grab, and I didn't grab the right area. And so I fell in the game. And thankfully, there were handles below me I could grab, and I grabbed one. But that is also the first time in VR where falling felt like falling.
Yeah.
And it really fucked with me for about a half second.
Dude, it gave me a sense of panic. There was one part where I was just like, can I reach it? And I didn't. And I fell for a second, but I grabbed on. So I was like, oh shit. Like my brain was like, Joe, what did you almost killed us there, bud. Yeah.
Yeah. That sense of immersion that it brings is truly, it genuinely surprised me. And then I just ended up having fun. I need to share it on social media. But I found the little cave painting section where the Watcher breaks out and painted a dude who found drip in the far flung future. He had a yellow Adidas bucket hat with a blue logo on it. He found a crisp, clean white Nike shirt with a red swoosh.
Yeah.
He had some purple Adidas track pants and some gold Nikes. I mean, my man was looking good. And then I told my wife, as she was watching me just be an idiot because I was having a good time. She was like, "You're getting way too into this." And then I said, "No, I was like, listen, this is the future. The internet doesn't exist anymore. They can't use it." I was like, I need to make sure that the people know. Don't look up blue waffle. Just don't do it. So I painted a blue waffle, and then I put a red X around it, or the circle and the slash.
Right,
and all
I thought you were gonna do caveman porn, but I like where this went.
But my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "They need to know." She's like, "They won't even know what blue waffle is." I said, "In case anyone from the olden times has spread the word of mouth, they need to know." But no, I've had a blast with it. I'm not super far. I've spoke with Aloy. I don't really think that's anything of that's not surprising.
Minutes, yeah.
I tried to boop her, and I was very disappointed that
you didn't get to boop her.
I didn't get to boop her. I was very. It made me laugh because I was also trying to do the Spy Master, and every time I would try to reach my hand out to him, he'd go and recoil back,
and he stares at you like, "What the fuck is your deal?"
Yeah, but no, past that, I really did. I think that game has a really high level of immersion. Building things I thought was cool. I actually thought putting the pickaxe is, I know it's a gimmick, but the thing about VR is that the gimmick works in VR. It's like gimmicks in other games. It's kind of like, oh, it's a gimmick. There's a disconnect. So I keep having that in my mind where I'm like, it's not. It's like it's not there in other games. Like I would hate to have to build that pickaxe if it was a flat screen game. But you give me some motion controllers and you let me actually wrap the twine around it. Hell yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
So I'm very into it. I'm not super far. The only real complaint I have with it, I think the combat feels great. I don't like that combat puts you on a radius.
Real? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you're in an open area like the first Watcher, you're in a radius. You're going to go in a circle around it. If you're on a cliffside like with the Glint Hawks, it's going to put you in a side-by-side rail. And I know that they're trying to do that to basically onboard people. Like it's not going to be too much for you to have to control it. But I wish that was a comfort setting option.
Yes.
Combat can be full free movement. And I think part of it is that you don't want to have to be thinking about moving left and right while you're reaching back to notch an arrow. There's plenty of things. But it really broke the immersion. Like for as good as the bow combat feels, having your sense of presence and movement go away kind of sucked. I was like, oh, this.
And just because because you get to move left and right and you get to strafe, but moving left to right, at least to me, felt so slow where like there are some combat sections where like how you gain health is like you eat apples and fruits and stuff.
Dude, most realistic apple texture I've like,
right?
I ate the apple and I looked down and said, why the fuck did they realistically model this much? It looks like I can see where teeth have gone into the soft part of the apple. Continue. It just blew my mind.
Those little stations, I always feel like I'm either dodging past them or I'm just like crawling slowly towards them because midway to the end game, they throw a lot more enemies at you. The only thing that I have a problem with the combat is not only just the radius, but the variety in which you're fighting things. So, you know, there's a section where it's just like, hey, this part you have to duck. And I thought it was going to be a whole lot of, you know, do some ducking, do some strafing, like more of that. But I felt like you could just lean on strafing away from things. Worked far better than anything else. And so why would you need to go duck, dive, and dodge past anything? You just had that one ability that was so, I feel, OP.
Like the game wasn't balanced around it enough.
Yeah.
And that is unfortunate because as I was playing last night, I started getting the feeling that they were going to have it to where a lot of your encounters were going to just be one type of machine and you're just going to, it's like, well, just keep, my hope was that the early encounters are one machine so that you learn the mechanics. Well, you need to strafe here and you need to learn the weakness of the glint hawk. But I started kind of feeling like, I think that it's going to be like all one type of machine. And I would love to be at like a watcher and you shoot it in the eye and then you duck and the glint hawk flies over and you bust open its cold storage.
Yeah,
and then an alligator comes. You know what I mean? That's good. I'm glad.
They will mix and match a bit. In a sense where like there's one boss fight where you're fighting big boss, watchers are coming in. There's one part where you're fighting a mini boss and then scalpers coming or whatever they're called.
Scrappers or whatever.
Scrappers. There you go. So they do mix and match a bit. To me, I feel like the combat feels great, but there's a lot of room for improvement there. I think it's where the most room for improvement is. The climbing aspect, I feel like Sony walked in the doors of Fire Sprite, saw that they were making a really awesome like climbing simulator game, was just like, okay, this is awesome. You could fit this in the Horizon universe, you know? And that's what they really did. Because to me, the climbing aspects, the puzzle solving in that regard, the epic climbs, they call them, I think, they feel epic. They feel like a ton of fun. And they are really fun. Like traversing usually is the boring part of a game, but here there's just so much you're interacting with. There's always something to do. It felt really rewarding, where I felt like the only thing that kind of needed work was the combat. And here I can finally say it after beating the game, you really didn't have to put a story in here, because honestly, it could have been like Reyes needs to find his brother, and that could have been it. That could have been like a redeeming point. The story here is so forgettable. I don't even remember the villain's name, and it's literally been 3 days since I've beaten it.
Oh man, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because this is a bold statement as early as I am, right? So, two things. Going back to your climbing. The only problem I have with the climbing, and I don't even think it's a problem with the game. It's a problem with the limitations of technology and what you can do. It relies on the player. I am purposely making sure I'm keeping my hands above my head to give me a sense of climbing, because realistically, once you grip, you can just pull them to your waist and you can do all the climbing like down here. And like, if you hate the climbing, I guess that's a way to get through it. But I found that because it was visually bothering me, because I was like, why?
Oh, really?
why are my hands right here? And like, I'm hanging from a cliff. My hands shouldn't be here. So I was like, I'm doing it. So I'm like, cliff. And I'm like, I know I look stupid. I don't even care.
Yeah.
I told my wife, like, how much of an asshole do I look like? She's like, you look super goofy. And I'm just over here like, and she was like, but it does look like you're climbing. I was like, so look, there you go. You get the picture. And it made it way more fun. Yeah. As soon as I started doing that, I was like, I'm going to play the whole game. Like, when I'm climbing, I'm going to be super dramatic. I'm just going to be like, ah! Man, one of the boldest choices in that game, and it really worked out surprisingly, is the jump mechanic for jumping to something that's away from you. So you squeeze the controllers and you pull your arms in, and it, like, I get the idea is like you're jumping. But the one that got me the most so far is when you're supposed to jump, reach behind you, pull out the picks, and shove them into the thing. I was like, that's a ballsy ask.
There's one where it's just like, hey, jump, and then at the same exact time, grab the grapple hook. And when you let go of that thing, when you get the grapple hook and you're jumping to grapple onto something and you're you feel like you're Indiana Jones with the whip.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good. Again, the traversal elements are the absolute strongest feature. And when you get to the vistas, you're just like, let me just take a moment. This is gorgeous.
It's very pretty. My bold take, we've talked about, I thought Horizon Forbidden West is a fine game.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I got platinum.
Not yet. I need to.
I might think that one more, from what I've played so far, if you give me one more iteration of this and you work on a little bit, I think I might like VR. I think I might like Horizon more as a first-person VR title. I think the sense of exploration is much higher. Yeah. I think the sense of climbing, some of my issues with both God of War Ragnarok and Horizon were that I'm starting to feel the fatigue of Sony's climb mechanics.
Yes.
And somehow that's gone when I have to physically do it.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, okay, you can hook me on the fact that Horizon's built around mountains that you need to climb. 100%. I'm cool. We got you. Now that I can physically do it, as weird as that may sound, the chore of having to do it makes it that much more engaging, which makes it that much more interesting. And suddenly I can climb. You know what I mean? But whenever you're telling me to climb a giant mountain as one character in God of War, it's like, this was kind of a lull for me in that particular game because I felt like I was spending a lot point doing an ultimately boring task.
Yeah.
Somehow engagement adds to it.
And that's actually one major point my buddy Ains over at Season Gaming was making. Was just like, I get the PlayStation style of game, you know, fight, climb, dialogue, squeeze through crevice. And I'm like, all right, fair. I understand the critique, but you know, to me, the climbing in this game, it's not because you're filling a loading screen or hiding a loading screen. You're actively doing something and you're figuring things out. It's not just hand holding you to the next objective, which I feel like Ragnarok, Horizon, you name it, they do it. Where I feel like if they give you more options to get to those things, where I feel like Ghost of Tsushima does that really well, I think we wouldn't mind the climb mechanics much, but I do agree with you. I feel like the climbing mechanics here and the world itself lends itself to VR better than I think most, if not all, of the PlayStation first parties do.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, I mean, definitely a sense of verticality, because verticality is a really easy VR point, right? It's like, you can get a sense of scale and you get up there. But really the combat impressed me while still being like, I can clearly see where as it tries to expand, it's going to fail a little bit. But I'm going to chalk that up to, hey, we've got to rush a game out of the door to meet launch.
Yeah.
I'm a little disappointed in the story because I also thought there's a way for you to tell more intimate stories that don't have to get so crazy when you feel like you're part of them. I really feel like first-person games can tell stories that if you think about the narrative, they sound mundane a little bit easier. Like God of War 2018 clearly told a mundane story in a fantastic way. Get to the top of the mountain, spread some ashes. Yeah. But I feel like VR is suited really well for, like, I kind of wish What Remains of Edith Finch was a VR game. That's actually what I was thinking the entire time I was playing it is, this is incredible. It has a really cool, interesting story. I would love to interact with all these things. Like, I'm seeing it from this perspective. It would be cool to interact with it truly from this perspective.
Yeah.
So, all right. So with that in mind, we're talking about different things going on. Kuno Guy says, hi guys, which game experience or mechanic would you like to see brought into the VR space?
Ooh.
It's a hard question because as you were talking about earlier, PSVR, or really VR in general, kind of feels like the Wild West of gaming because you were talking about gaming on a flat screen has continued to get more and more iterative, whereas gaming on VR feels like it's getting more and more revolutionary.
Yeah.
And so that dichotomy between the two means that VR kind of already feels like it's on this thing. Yeah. There's been some surprises lately. I don't know if you saw
Talk to me. Sony's
Skate VR. And it's a first-person skateboarding game where you're on a board, and they have just a little clip on it, but you should definitely look up. It's a very short clip, but it immediately got me thinking, like, how do you introduce the idea of skating into VR? You're not physically moving, you're not on a board. So what are you doing? Are you using your hands? How do your hands play into it? And it's just a consistent thing in my head, like, what is this? So it's a hard question because VR is constantly answering the question of what can we do in VR? What mechanic can be brought into here?
Yeah, and I'm looking at it right now. This looks awesome. Like that is the mechanic that's a mechanic to get. How do we introduce feet? How do we introduce jumping as well? Like we're actually like jumping to like that. That's interesting. I haven't tried the Swordsman VR, but I want to see how we make parrying and blocking in VR feel more impactful. Yeah. Because there's a way to do it. When I was playing this, I was like, how do we get a Ghost of Tsushima PlayStation VR game? I want to be Jin in first person. Please, for the love of God. Like, I want to do the standoffs. Like, that's what I want. But how do we make those feel good without them feeling corny? Or like that there's impact to the blades hitting. So
see, that's always the big question. And you think of like vibration can help. And they do that in a lot of games. Our vibrations to give you a sense of impact. So like if this were a can in VR and I can move my hand, even though my hand will realistically continue to go and knock the can over, there's nothing they can do, but they can at least add a vibration and go, oh, you just interacted with something. Okay, cool. I would love to see that when you have to deal with something that's elongated away from your body. Like how do you do that? Yeah. What is the way you do that?
Because if we're having a sword clash, like I'm thinking like this is like a lightsaber, right? Mm-hmm. If we're having that clash,
where does the resistance come in?
Yeah, where does the resistance come in? Are we talking like I gotta now get a band? Like, how does it work? Like, I would like, again, smarter people than me. It's like, put a backpack on. It'll be like you put gloves on. You'd be a frog. Like, and that's how you get the resistance. But like, I don't know. There's so many questions that people much smarter than me will have answered sooner than we think.
Sometimes there are answers you don't think about. Like, I don't know if you remember seeing, there was a third-party accessory for PSVR 1 that didn't work in every game, but it worked in some. And I think it was called the rudder. You'd put it on your feet, and while you were sitting and playing any kind of game like Skyrim VR supported it, you could tilt your feet forward, and that would activate movement, which is great because the biggest problem with Skyrim VR on PSVR 1 is that to move, you had to hold the move button in your right hand and hold your arm at a slightly forward tilt, and it was awful. It means that to do combat, you had to be standing still. Yeah. So the rudder was a good way to introduce that, but it's like the biggest question you always have to have is the answer needs to be something that can exist within the base level technology as much as possible. But sometimes you just can't. So it's like, how close to base can you get? Like we're talking about the gun and the rigid body. All right. Is it reasonable to just be like, hey, buy a $20 stock that your stuff connects to? Okay. $50 dock, whatever it be. All right. But what do you start getting into and what is the answer and how complicated is it to where only the most enthusiast players want to get into it? Well, then you're not really solving a problem. You're creating a niche.
Yep. Exactly. And so like, it's like, how do we answer that problem without introducing another peripheral?
Yeah, or at least how do you do it while introducing a peripheral that's going to be reasonable enough and cost effective enough that people will at least mostly adopt it?
Fair. Yeah.
You know, because like I think about like, I love the idea of a VR treadmill, right? Because the idea of being able to physically move your body and finally get past that, because in VR, I've noticed that if you can do the movement your character is doing in the game, you really minimize you drastically minimize motion sickness because your body feels like you're reaching and hitting that point. So like if in the game it's trying to make me duck under, you best believe I'm ducking under whether there's a button for it or not. You know?
Yeah.
If in the game I'm jumping, guess what, bro? I'm jumping. It's like I'm going to try and do what I'm seeing in game as much as possible if it doesn't already do that for you. So it's, but you know, you can't rely on that for everything. So it's a big problem. One thing kind of in that vein, and this is probably more doable, but I don't know that I've seen it in a VR game yet. A weird mechanic that I don't see very many games, but I adore. And it's one of the things that I think an Xbox IP has really gotten super right. Gears of War's perfect reload mechanic is one of my favorite shooter mechanics out there. It's super satisfying. It engages you in gameplay, and it makes what could have otherwise been mindless third-person shooting and cover-based stuff, or at least more mindless. It makes it feel like you got to be on edge. You got to be paying attention. You got to be able to hit that right when you want it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you pull that into VR, but I would love to see it. Like you've got to physically time reloading and putting everything in. And if you do, you get, you know, it's kind of a cheat, but it's like your first shot after that has got more damage or whatever.
Sure. Or like it's a heat seeker. I don't know. Like, cause like how would you do it? How would you do it? It's like, how do we achieve the perfect reload? What, like you slam the magazine just ever so correctly, but then you're hitting your controllers back. Like it's a whole thing. So maybe if it was like a shotgun game, like you time when you switch it back, you know, like you're in Terminator 2, maybe that's how you could get it right.
See, this is how we do it. We make a Resistance VR title.
Insomniac
is known, and the Resistance franchise is known for having crazy weapons with crazy secondary fires. Introduce the perfect reload into that. You can only have it to where it works on guns that are two-handed, that makes sense to do it, like a shotgun or a rifle, to where it would be a magazine away from the trigger so that your hands wouldn't be interacting with it. Like a pistol is too short. If trying to do that, which I'm curious. I want to see how that interacts because like I've done it in Resident Evil 4 VR for the Quest, and I'm about to do it for Resident Evil 8 VR. I want to see how much having a full circle around your hand limits your ability to feel like you're doing that, because that's one of the biggest moments in VR I've had so far is Resident Evil 4 VR, reaching down, grabbing your clip. It also makes a game that's otherwise very easy, or at least considerably easy. Like now it's hard. It's like it's not hitting square to reload, baby. It's reaching down, grabbing it, and then every shot you got to make sure you're counting, because if you have to reload, you have ammo that's scarce, and you have to make sure you're not missing because it's going to take you time more so than just ammo. So yeah, I would love to see that. I don't know. I guess the big question is all the mechanics we talk about are ones that there feels like there's a physical barrier.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe VR will never get past, and we just don't know. But I applaud the fact that VR tries so hard. I think VR they're already doing it with one. Have you seen that? And you may have heard of the game prior, like I had. Have you seen that Before Your Eyes is coming to PSVR 2?
Yes, Kyle's super hyped about that.
Me too.
Very excited for it. Yeah.
Great use of existing technology, right? Yeah. Well, okay, on PC, it tracks your eyes and looks and sees when you blink. Well, okay, this is eye tracking. Instead of it being a webcam, we're going to have it to where now we can also see where you're looking.
Just because of how it tracks your eyes.
Yeah.
Which is just damn nuts.
So in that vein, I would really like to see eye tracking. If it probably doesn't exist to this quality yet. But if it can tell that you're blinking, then there's some degree of thing. I would love to see a game, and there's a question I guess this could go to, but I would love to see a game kind of try doing the LA Noire style thing and have it to where how your facial expressions interact with other things gives some kind of way. Like if you give someone a scold, it gives them a higher chance of giving you information.
Yes.
But if you're too soft with them and your appearance is too soft and you're not being gazing enough, then they're gonna run over you a little bit more. And I would like to be all like that, kind of like you get in a game like LA Noire, but it's not tied to you pushing a button to invoke that. Instead, it's like, this is just going to be fluid and it's going to happen without you being prompted. And that's how I think you really use VR to create something that feels like it's being birthed in the moment. Everyone's going to have that, like, dude, when you ran into this guy, what happened? Oh man, I played good cop, bad cop with him, Yeah,
exactly. Like your gestures, your brow movements could kind of dictate, like, I'm intimidating a guy, so I'm pressing B, but I'm also like scrunching up my face, like, like glaring at him, or like I'm giving like a subtle wink at like a wink or a nod of like, hey, keep this between us. Wink to like bribe someone.
And go the extra mile. Mix that with physical interactions, right? The SpongeBob joke of you got to ask him a question first. It's like, what color's my underwear? And then you smack the shit out of him.
Yeah,
you can do those things, right? You can have it to where, like, if you want to be aggressive with the player, you can, but then your look can back that up. And it could even be that if you're trying to be physically aggressive, but your look is being too soft, it's like, he's not going to buy it. It's like, so I would love to see. I guess what I always want is I want games, definitely when they're in this immersive level like this. Like, I don't really care if a game like The Last of Us does it, but games that can really make first person feel like you're interacting with the game and the game is changing because of your input, and without you having to prompt, like, well, I hit B, so I told it what I wanted. I really think there's a lot of value in having games change around what you're doing. One of my examples was talking with a friend who's a big Harry Potter fan, and we were talking crap about what houses we ended up in Hogwarts.
Ravenclaw, baby.
And I was like, I'm Slytherin. I was like, it's just because you're not Slytherin or whatever. And she was like, whatever, you chose that. And I was like, oh, no. Because my form, I was like, I kept the class that it told me I was. Sure. And it just so happens that I do like Slytherin. I wouldn't have changed it anyway. Because my version of how I think that game should have gone, the magic idea behind the sorting hat should be that you play the game, you start, you have an opening setup before that. The game looks at things that you've done, interactions you've made, how you've approached something, if you tried being cunning or brute force. And then after you work through the entire thing, you diegetically get to the point where you get to the sorting hat, and it looks at how you've played and it tells you what house you're in. And at least for the first playthrough, you can't change it. That would be my version of it. And then replayability means that, hey, on second playthrough, you can choose whichever house you want. That way you can see anything that you missed or how it changes the game. I like it when games do that. I think the same thing as Cyberpunk. It shouldn't be that I choose to be this kind of kid, right? You should let me into a situation where what I am doesn't matter, but let me play and then figure out how my actions most closely align with Corpo or, Nomad or whatever it be. That's how I think I would love to see games do.
Nomad life.
Nomad life. I was a street kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was a street kid.
All right.
But it's okay. Hey, the love of my life was a nomad, so I can't,
Oh, you're a Pan Am guy? I was a Judy gal through and through.
See, here's the problem I faced was that I wanted to romance Judy and Pan Am because I quite like Judy I think Judy goes to show the power of CD Projekt Red's character building. I don't care what you think about that game or anything else. Judy is one of the most fully real, and so is Pan Am. I'll give them both credit. The characters in that game that you really get a lot of time with feel like more people than people I interact with on a day-to-day basis sometimes.
But I was talking to my buddy Ains. I hate that I'm name dropping him so much. But he used to
shout out Ains,
He sucks. But like, and old. But like we were agreeing out like he was just like, just wait till you're like halfway through the game, you're gonna see how this writing takes off. And you're right, like Johnny Silverhand, I'm like, he's one of the best written characters in a video game, and I'll fight anybody. Because like midway through, like he's talking to like in the beginning, you fight like there's some spoiler stuff that Johnny does, and then midway through, I'm like, yeah, I feel like, you know what? we should burn this place to the ground. I don't think there's any saving it. I think
I thought the same of Carrie, right? Like you get that interaction with Carrie, and at first I'm like, and then the game keeps going. I'm like, damn, he's got a lot of depth. This is surprisingly working. So yeah, that's another thing, in terms of what kind of things you want to see. I would love to see games that choose to go that in-depth VR or that in-depth RPG in VR, because I think one of the biggest things that we talked about with Quest, right, is that Quest as a singular entity without PC connectivity, there is nothing that matches the scope of pretty much anything that's on, that realistically is going. Like Skyrim VR can't be played on that, but that is the VR moments when you can play what feels like a massive game that you have real presence in on VR. It's a big change. Really changes things up.
Absolutely.
All right, so here we are. We have 2 more questions that we're going to wrap out VR talk with, and then we're going to fly through the rest of this. First thing I know you're going to love, because you, my man, are a connoisseur of the From software.
Ooh, that's when I get excited, guys. That's my call sign.
Sean Horn asked, do you think we could get a Souls game in VR?
God, I hope.
I think it would look amazing. Something to think about here. From Software were very early adopters of that, and they did do Daracene. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you just say Daracene. I say Daracene. The accent mark, I'm like, there's an Enya somewhere.
I never know which of the accent marks makes it like a bossy E or whatever.
Yeah,
so I
that's
just
fair.
chose to say Daracene.
But I think when they're talking From Software, they're talking your Dark Souls, they're talking your From
100%,
your Bloodborns. One day. God, I hope that day soon.
Well, this goes back to your conversation about parries, right? I think the biggest issue is you've got to solve the disconnect that will get you there. That's why I think games like Horizon are such a good fit, because bow, arrow, and guns are really easy solutions.
Yes.
But physical contact in VR, unless you're fighting something that you immediately slice through, like there's a game called what is it, After the Fall? Or not After the Fall, hold on.
That's a Left 4 Dead style game.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Before, hold on.
Well, while you type, I'll talk. To me, I think let's take the swords and shields out of it for a sec, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe it is something akin to like, what if I'm a ranger? What if I'm a pyromancer? What if I'm like a warlock, a witch, whatever have you? And like I'm casting spells, and like there's movements or gestures that I can do to block enemies, or things that I can do to dodge and maybe even parry a bit. Like we could toss them. Like, to me, it's tossing out what we think a From Software game is and going, how do we make it work for VR, rather than trying to force those mechanics in with what we think of like a hack and slash, like, From Software game would be, thinking of like a Bloodborne. So by making it maybe ranged focused, you could introduce those concepts better in VR.
Yeah,
perhaps.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. The game I was thinking about is called Until You Fall. It's a roguelite. It's a hack and slash roguelite for VR. And the idea is that like when you get to most enemies, you just slice right through them. There's no reason they don't block or try and do anything like that. They can attack you, but you have opportunities. Like you can die. You can like, it's not a parry really, but like if you do things at the right time, like knock their hand away. But you don't have to have that same sense as I feel like you'd have to have in a Souls game. So,
ooh, this looks cool. All right.
It is an interesting game. It needs a little bit more, but it's a cool idea nonetheless. It's in that VR in between where it's like, well, you gotta walk before you can run.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's the hoping they get a chance to run with a similar idea, because it's a good game. All right, last question.
Okay. No
Fate, one of our patrons, he comes in and he says, "Oh, actually, I have a couple." It's fine, we'll get there. Right. No Fate says, both of you pitch your own VR game.
I mean, mine's is all branding. Like, just give me a Star Wars game. What I got to do. I mean, yeah, we already got one right now. Like, just give me another. I don't know what. Like, give me an X-wing and no. See, they already got one. Then, all right, fuck. I was gonna say, give me a lightsaber game. They got me. It was Vader Immortal. Just anything in the Star Wars universe, I'm gonna be into it. So maybe give me a Mando game. Give me a bounty hunter
shooter.
game.
There you go.
Yeah,
shooter focus more.
Or to
revive 1313 as
whatever
a VR
that
title
was going to be. You know what? If Mando ran because of, or Mando lived because 1313 had to die, that's fair. Now, I'll say this: the game that I would actually want, and I think would play really well in, and I think your cat's going to agree, is Cyberpunk. I think the different weapons that you're able to shoot, and like all the manufacturers, like you can make even works for like Borderlands. Like each manufacturer's weapon could feel and literally feel the same, or feel different, and like having the what is it, the mantis blades. Like,
Ooh.
what if when you're to access the mantis blades, all you got to do is grip the controllers. Right, press R1 and L1 at the same time, then push your arms back, and the
and they fly open.
pop out. Yeah, like that would be rad as hell. So give me that, because I think you're right. I think what we're really missing here is a truly deep RPG, and I think games like Demio that like solve the board game aesthetic work. Now let's see how a true RPG would feel here. What does your cat think?
I think he 100% agrees. So for anyone watching on video, this is Onyx. I rescued him from work. He was a shop kitty. We had a bunch of cats out there. They're just strays because it's a big warehouse plant, you know?
Sure.
And one of them got ran over by a forklift on accident. So we started worrying about getting him safe. But I do need to go put him up real quick. So entertain the people. I didn't know he was in here. I locked him in.
No, he's like, please get me out of here. Hey guys, listen, it's just me. Oh, look at that. Look at that cat. Hey guys, listen, you're probably listening to this via Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The Trophy Room, a PlayStation podcast, which you should definitely listen to right after you're done listening to this show. We're currently doing a Resident Evil 4 giveaway. If you rate the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're following the show over at PS Trophy Room. And, share us a clip of your review and you're entered in. Look at it. It's that easy. I just did some, you got the headset on. I was just doing some plugging of the show, letting people know about our Resident Evil giveaway.
Go right on ahead.
All right, good.
I want to tell you, first of all, seeing all the big stuff you're doing.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you boys.
Thank
Y'all are
you.
doing things I've been thinking about doing and trying to work ways and time into. So it's nice to see someone else try and run and really make big moves.
Honestly, can I tell you something that we could get into the community takes and all that?
Let's do it.
The biggest advice I could give is just do it. Just like Shia. Pull a Shia, just do it. It is really scary because we had Jane Perry on, we had Danielle Bisotti. That's how she said it. And she's like, give me, I love, like, because I messed up the first time. She's like, no. Give me the Italian flair. And she was fantastic. And, everybody, they're just like, how did you get him on? Just ask.
Oh, 100%.
Just ask. It's honest to goodness, shoot your shot, kids. The worst is that they say no. The least bad is like they don't reply because they're busy. But the best is like, yeah, when and where. Yeah.
It's really great to see you guys doing that. So I mean, really big ups to you for anyone who enjoys and listens to your show. And I'll tell you, I don't tend to listen to gaming podcasts for a number of reasons. I like to not feel like my opinion is being bled in by someone else. But
Kyle is the same way. Yeah,
and I think it's important, and it doesn't mean you can't appreciate those shows for what they are. And sometimes I'll listen to stuff that I think, okay, I'm not doing anything like that. I just find this interesting. Like Colin does a whole bunch of bring people on who kind of got shamed out into the industry and just hear their story. No, he doesn't agree or disagree or say what he thinks. It's just, I'm giving you a platform to let's talk. And I find those super interesting. So I can enjoy other content that way. But every now and then, if y'all are talking about something that I'm like, I don't think we'll really talk about that, I'll tune in and kind of just get y'all's thoughts on stuff.
Thanks,
I definitely I tuned in and listened to the Horizon whenever I asked y'all about that, because I think it's a genuine question for the PlayStation fan base of at what point do you start to feel much like the Star Wars fan base has had issues to where occasionally you feel like you're getting bombarded, and it's like a blessing and a curse. Like you feel good that you're getting bombarded, but you also have that worry of like,
But
Can
one
I
day,
eventually get tired of it?
yeah. And so like to me with that question too, I'll answer it here on the show is as long as the content's great, that won't matter. It's the times where you slip. I think it's something the MCU is kind of facing where it's doing a little bit too much and not appreciating the folks that are doing the hard work to bring those things to life. Where if they scaled back and they were just like, hey, listen, we can have 3 movies a year that are going to be great instead of trying to shove in 5. That's where I think the quality, it has to be quality over quantity. So as long as those projects are good and written well, then it doesn't matter to me how many are there, because for me in the Star Wars fandom, I'm eating. Like people can talk whatever they want about who's a Skywalker or not, but to me it's like Mando's great, and Andor is a completely different show that is just like it doesn't even need to be in Star Wars. Like it's too good for us, to be honest. So it's too high thinking for us. But like then you have like the cartoon shows. So, like Lucasfilm's done a great job of showing you like you can do a whole bunch of stuff with this IP, and as long as it's written well or competently, people connect to it. Then it doesn't matter how much is out there. But I understand fatigue is always a problem that people have. And I think sometimes people try to will it into existence, if that makes sense.
It does happen.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. I guess my quick pitch of a VR game. A while back on one of the episodes, and I've been thinking about it more and more, and it's a very simple mechanic to start a game idea with. But I like this idea of, I was talking about it'd be fun to have a game where you have a fishing reel, like a fishing pole, and it's a bow at the same time. So this is like a game where somebody who's into fishing ends up in this weird situation where they end up having to fight. And so they turn their fishing rod into like a compound bow by just pressuring it. And I thought it'd be really interesting to have a thing where like you shoot an arrow, but it's connected to like a fishing line. So I think about games like, have you ever played Titan Souls?
No.
Okay, so it's like a top-down Shadow of the Colossus boss rush style game, but you have a single arrow, and every time you shoot it, you got to pick it up or pull it back into you. And one of the mechanics is that you shoot the bow, and then like the arrow goes, and you can pull it back into you and get a second hit in. Well, I thought it'd be cool to have it to where like, your fishing mini game is you're playing like you're shooting an arrow and then reeling it in. In the combat, you're doing like, you pull out your bow, you shoot it, and then that's your one arrow. It's on a string. And if it sticks into something, you can like reel them in towards you, almost like Scorpion style. Yeah. And otherwise, you can shoot it past them. And if they dodge that, then you can. I thought it'd be cool, like for VR, if you're going to try and adapt this to that, which is kind of what I was thinking. Like this would work, right? You shoot it in VR and it goes, and then you can shoot it past somebody, or you can shoot it in different ways, and you can either choose to reel it in, or you can reach up and physically grab the line and yank them towards you. I was like, that would be really cool. So I'm thinking something where it's kind of like you talked about with Horizon, where it's like, fuck the story. Like you can have a setup, you can have like a little reason as to why things are happening, but then just let me be in that world. Let me run around and fight creatures and find interesting ways to think about using an arrow that has a fishing line attached to it. And I just love the idea of shooting it and then watching the string go from your bow, and like you whip it up and then you start using like a reel to pull it in. So I think that would be fun. I think kinetic games really work in VR, and that seems like something that would be very kinetic and frenetic. But yeah, dude, definitely something in that big, deep RPG vein. You've got something going there. We go to our last question from one of our patrons, Aztec King. He says, I have a question for you guys. Are you guys excited for the slinger that is
don't
Beat
say
Saber?
That word here. Oh, wait, no, slinger, no, that's allowed. Slinger's allowed.
Not banger. Yeah, I only said it to clarify, but no, we don't.
I understand.
He says, are you ready? Are you excited for the slinger that is Beat Saber whenever it comes to PSVR 2? Besides drum rock, would you guys like to see any other type of rhythm game for PSVR 2?
I know Kyle's been playing like an air guitar game, and he's been digging it.
Yeah, there is one.
I am so excited for Beat Saber. I am hoping that there's a way to connect your old albums to Beat Saber, fingers crossed, but something has me doubtful. And I would say also for any, bleed over listeners here from the trophy room, Kyle hates the word no cap. So tell Kyle, no cap. I think the trophy room's amazing.
No cap.
No cap. And he says it doesn't annoy him, but you can see there's a glint in his eye going, damn it. Joe found out the word I hate.
Through years of experience and just waiting to see his reactions.
Exactly.
Man, I like the idea behind Beat Saber, and I've played it at the friend's house who has a Vive. But at least in their current forms, I would, it sounds like what you're saying of Pistol Whip is a little closer to what I think a VR rhythm game would be, a little more engaging for me. And that's something to where you get the sense of playing to a rhythm, kind of like Hi-Fi Rush and Metal Hellsinger, and it sounds like Pistol Whip, where you can play and you can do damage and everything, even if you're off the beat. But if you're playing to the beat, you get that sense of rhythm, and you start feeling like you're firing on the beat, and you're playing into that. And the reward is that if you're on time, you do better. You get more points, you do more damage, whatever it be. I think rhythm games, for me, it depends on the type of rhythm game, right? Like, I think Metal Hellsinger was really fun and really good at being particularly that, like, play to the rhythm. People have been loving Hi-Fi Rush, and it's that same idea. Like, you don't have to be great to just play it, but if you can hit to where the rhythm is constantly, you're on beat, it's even crazier. So I think when you have all those things going, those games can be really fun, but that's kind of a skewing. I mean, like, you can go to like social rhythm games, like Rock Band's great. But is there really any reason to play Rock Band in VR? I mean, I guess I guess if you just want that extra thing of being able to, the old Guitar Hero and Rock Band games was like the crowd is your gauge, and I guess in that sense you could actually visibly see the crowd. I'm not saying there wouldn't be a place for it, but I think that those games for me excel the most because of their social aspects, and VR is the antithesis of social in a shared space. It's great for social for something like Zenith, and I kind of am interested in Zenith, the MMO.
A little bit, right?
Not because I really want an MMO. I want to see how they're choosing to solve some of the MMO questions in a VR essence. But so yeah, I don't know. I think any rhythm game is inherently going to be focused around you as a singular person. And I would rather that not necessarily be an air guitar game or anything like that. Not saying that there's not interest for it. And there's certainly workout and cardio. And if you're a big fan of music, benefits to it. It's kind of where you are, Yeah. So I am excited in terms of the people I know who love Beat Saber, get more Beat Saber. Bam, bam. That's all you really need. And Absolutely. With improved tracking over PSVR 1, if that's your only experience.
Oh my God, it's going to be so much better.
Yeah. They do have a demo for that drum rock, though. So if you want to go try that out, anyone, they got VR demos. Like you said, demos can help a lot of people come in. I agree with you, man. Demos, I'm super glad that a lot of games have been demoing it up. Even if everyone ended up kind of slamming on Forspoken, I respect the hell out of them for putting a demo out. Yeah. It was the right move. Even if it hurt him, it was a good move for everyone else. So you know what? Speaking of music, we get to go into the community's take, where one of our patrons, B-Raj88, last week asked us, and we decided to ask you. Chris had his. We decided to go into some pretty crazy ones of this. So we've already answered this question. So Joe will give you a chance to answer as well. But you get funding to develop any game. And as a bonus, you get the rights to any musical artist's entire discography to use for your game. Who are you picking and why? So just throw it out there. You can use the music just to amp up your gameplay, kind of like Doom does. You can use it to where your music is working the story around it, and it can either be kind of like a musical a la Disney. Okay. Within a game where you're using the songs to actually tell a story. So the first thing I always do anytime we get...
Hamilton, and it's made by Telltale. Let's go.
Oh boy, that has a chances of getting really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Joe. All right.
No, you want a real answer?
Hey, go for it, man. Let everyone in on your musical taste here. That's what this really is.
I'm a huge metalhead. I also love hip hop. I also love pop. So like,
Man,
I'm
it
all
sounds
over the
to
place.
me like you are like me and you just love music that you like.
Yeah, I also have ADHD.
Like, trust me, I hear music sometimes and I'm like, I don't like anything about that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's not about genre. I mean, I definitely have tendencies toward a genre.
Yeah.
But if I like a song, I don't give a shit if it's country, pop, jazz. If I like it, I like it, you know?
I want the simple. I want something simple. There's a song that I listen to that always gets. It reminds me of Bloodborne, and I just want people to know that this would be an excellent trailer, music for Bloodborne, and give me "Burden" by Slipknot, a 5-minute trailer of Bloodborne attached to it, because that is blood. Like that song to me is just, it's Bloodborne. Like that is the vibe. But if I'm getting any money to make any game that I want using any discography, yeah, give me a rhythm Soulsborne game that let's drown out the metal. We got a lot of metal. But like, let's give us
throwing out the burden.
Right.
I got to give you
Chef's kiss.
Yeah. Hey, throwing out deep cuts.
Deep cuts
for Slipknot. Yeah. That's real fan Slipknot stuff right there.
There you go. But
I'm proud of you. I'm wearing my Slipknot shirt right now. Not that you can see it, but I am wearing my Slipknot shirt.
I have not seen them live. I really do want to. But yeah, no. I give me a Soulsborne game that is just based off pop, and just like the whole discography as well. Give me something cheerful and upbeat while I'm fighting for my goddamn life. I say, give me that, or give me death. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I always like.
I want to kill to the beat of Elton John. You know. Slicing and dicing to Tiny Dancer.
That'd be so good.
Do it.
Hold me closer.
Tiny Dancer. Yeah.
Yeah. The slings, like you do a parry and you hear the shwung, like directly in time with the music. Why not? B-Raj, the patron who gave the question, I'm going to re-give his. He gave it last week, but whenever he asked the question. But I always like to, anytime we get a community's take from a listener, we like to give their answer first and foremost. So he says, give me Nas's collection as a whole, and I could tell such an amazing story with his music.
All right. I like that.
There you go. Yeah, give you a little bit of, what's life like on the street? You got that going? Yeah. There you go. Velvet Thunder. This is the most interesting answer. And absolutely zero shame. And he says it with zero shame, so I appreciate it. It's just one of those things that you hear and it's like, wow, okay, it's so foreign to me. But he says, he's a patron if I didn't mention that. Thank you, Velvet. He says, since I don't listen to music, I'm going to choose the Persona 5 composers and I'd want to make a Persona game.
Fair enough.
It's a cheat code, right? He's just like, a game that I already like, and then just make more of that game because their music is great. Yeah. Hey, you know what? Fair enough. It doesn't have to be VR, but you could, right?
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, this is across the board, whatever you want. This is any
fair
game.
Enough. Well, you know what? I already gave my answer. I don't want to rethink it over. I'll break my brain.
You know what? Fair. Right now, when you're on the edge of Migraine City, you probably don't want to do that.
Ooh. Oh, I'm central. I'm central station of Migraine City. Yeah.
Grand Central Station. Justin Goodrum, he's a newer listener, or at least a newer of reaching out and speaking with us over on Facebook. He said the Japanese band Love Bites, fast, heavy Dragon Force level guitar solos would make for some great boss battle background music, or perhaps just make a band specific rock band / Guitar Hero. You know what? Guitar Hero Metallica was fucking awesome. I used to love the band specific ones because it's like, okay, yeah, I want to play a bunch of Metallica and then songs that they hand choose that they also want you to play. That's awesome. It's a great idea.
Yeah. The Beatles one? Ooh-wee. That's what I'm at.
I'm not a big Beatles fan,
Huge Beatles. That's what I grew up on. I barely know any Metallica songs as much as I love metal. I barely know any Metallica. I grew up on the Beatles and Queen.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. My dad was a metalhead, so I grew up on Disturbed, Godsmack, Metallica. Like, I was 5 years old in the back seat singing Down with the Sickness and singing Godsmack. It goes to show how great my parents were. Just in the back seat, like, stay away from me. The one I used to always yeah.
Preschool teacher comes up to your dad. He doesn't want to share. He's just screaming, "Stay away from me!" I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah. I was getting onto him for being, he was messing with his Game Boy while he was in class, and he said, "Get off of my back, bitch!" Yeah.
he kept on saying, like, listen, I don't want to say anything about your son, but he's getting sick all the time. He's coughing. He's going, it's we're concerned.
Anytime I try to discipline him, he just goes, "Wah!" Oh man. But to that extent, right? Some of the great music I listened to growing up and still listen to all the time. Josh Shoop comes in and says, "Chainsaw Man the game, except you're Fred Durst. The OST is exclusively Limp Bizkit," as it should be.
God damn. Thank God.
Fire game. You can make a fire game off of that.
Thank God, like during the early 2000s, I feel like my parents did raise me right, because I know nothing about Limp Bizkit, and I feel like I'm better for it.
Limp Bizkit's so good. I love them so wholeheartedly, and I say this knowing that the thing I appreciate about Limp Bizkit, right? Their shit is sometimes so cheesy, but they sell it with the most fucking heart. Like, he says that shit like it's from his heart, and I believe it.
Yeah.
If any other man looked me in the face and was like, "I pick a chainsaw," what? I'd be like, "You fucking stupid." But something about Fred Durst, my man has got the ability to hype people the fuck up.
All right.
It's amazing. Jokes aside, there are some genuinely fantastic ballads from them, or what you would call like a heavy ballad from them. Some of their absolute best songs are not goofy in the slightest. They are fantastic, but some of their best songs are also rolling. You just fucking.
That's
go
all
with
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the life, man. There's a song they have an album called Gold Cobra, and there's a song where the chorus is just like, "One more sucker MC gonna fry," and I fucking love it. It gets me super hype every time I hear it. It's a great song. I don't even know. Limp Bizkit lives softly in my heart. Right. I have such a soft spot for them.
I'm not here to take Limp Bizkit away from you at all.
I understand that and I respect that. But yeah, we have a handful of people who listen to the show and around the show who just fucking love Limp Bizkit. So we just like share memes and stuff with each other.
That's fair. Times. That's fair.
It's good times.
I like you and the five others. I'm happy for.
The five other Limp Bizkit fans. Yeah. Joshua Lago comes in with our last one that we're going to do here. He says, "Battlefront 3, a modern build with a lot of the design features and ideas of the one we never got." John Williams' score, of course.
Oh, Christ, yes.
Alternatively, Fetus Farmer, the movie, the game, which is basically Scorn, but with a lot more amniotic fluid, set to Nirvana's In Utero and a lot of guitar feedback.
God,
this is a fantastic answer.
Oh God! First off, what was the game you mentioned? Scorn creeped me out from the get. I was like, no, this is too Geiger for me. No, I'm out.
That game looked incredible. Visually, that game is insane. I'm a very big fan.
Couldn't do it.
Hey, in the future, if you want to be part of our community's take, where we give a question that either comes from us or one of our listeners that we repurpose out to you guys, you can find us over on Twitter at Triangle SQRD. You can find us on Facebook in the group Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. If you ask to be entered into there, I'll gladly let you in. Or you can always click down in the description below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast service, and find the link to our Discord where you can join in. We have a dedicated section for community's take. You can chat up about the podcast itself. We have a dedicated section for that, or just hit us up with anything. We have music discussion over there if you want to come and tell everyone how much you love Limp Bizkit, as you should. We can slowly but surely bully Joe into listening to Limp Bizkit. That is my goal by the end of this episode.
Listen, or you just say, you come in, go Gaga is queen, because here on the trophy room, we stand Gaga more than anything.
Go for it, man. Gaga's great.
Fact. She's queen, and we do not disrespect her. She's only royalty.
Me and Chris, right? We have our little pantheon of queens, but they're all queens of metal. So it's like Courtney LaPlante from Spirit Box, Tatiana from Ginger.
Okay.
Hey, we have those are the two we've been on a lot lately.
Yeah. Me and my best friend, we stand Maria Brink for obvious. It's obvious. We've seen her live twice and just respectfully. Also, fun fact, I found out John Williams scored Harry Potter, and I'm like, oh, that's why that soundtrack is such a bop.
It is excellent.
It is John Williams. Excellent. God, you deserve all the rest, sir. Go retire for the love of God.
Yeah, 2 iconic franchises right under his belt.
Boom. Yeah.
Like nothing. Like just chewing gum that you can pull out at any time.
Yeah.
You want some?
Anytime. Elfman, hold my wand or whatever this thing is they have. You know? I need to rest now.
Hey, shout out to Elfman, though. Also a fantastic composer. Gotta give it to him. All right, we're gonna go into the news. So first thing on the news, pretty quick, pretty innocuous. Capcom have announced Capcom Spotlight, a presentation focusing on upcoming Capcom games with titles such as Resident Evil 4 Remake, Mega Man, Battle Network, Legacy Collection, Exoprimal, and more confirmed for the show, airing March 9th. So if you want more of Resident Evil 4, if the state of play was just not enough for you, you're going to have some. They're going to be talking about, Sunbreak for Monster Hunter Rise coming to PlayStation and stuff as well. So check into that. You been Capcom fan, Joe?
I've become a big Capcom guy. So fun fact, Resident Evil 7 is my first Resident Evil game.
Right? Oh, okay, nice.
And then I fell in love with that game. And then I played 2 Remake, 3 Remake. Like ever since I've just been Resident Evil now is I stand it, because for me, the thing that got me into survival horror is Dead Space. So God knows I love that Dead Space remake. It means so much to me that it's here. But Capcom's been hitting on such a level that it seems like every game they're putting out is just doing so well. So the one that I'm excited for, because this spotlight really does seem like just, hey, Resident Evil's out soon, and we got other games that need a spotlight. So this game could be the reason why people show up to highlight games like Exoprimal that I think look cool as shit. Like again, it's another one of those game ass game experiences. So I'm excited for this as much as I won't be streaming it live anywhere, but I'll be tuning in. Like,
yeah, for sure.
For a recap.
I think Capcom have really gotten to a point where this past generation specifically, and I think starting with Resident Evil 7, they've really started to set the pace in the industry in a sense to me. They are, I think the only reason Dead Space Remake exists is because Resident Evil 2 Remake came out and absolutely phenomenal, sold incredibly well, scored incredibly well. And I think EA saw reason to go, we have our own ability to tap back into a franchise of survival horror the one time that we decided to do it. And I'm glad that they did, because Resident Evil Remake, or Resident Evil Dead Space Remake rather, was excellent. But so was Resident Evil Remake. 7 was a big turning point for me. It turned me back into a fan.
Nice.
I love 4. 5 was just kind of a slog to get through. 6 just disconnected with me entirely. And when they showed 7, I was like, wow. And then they showed it in VR, and I thought, wow. So I played it in VR first, and I think that really helped. But I replayed it 2D last year, and I was really impressed at how well it holds up, even outside of VR and just in general all these years later. Great game. All right, man. Exoprimal. That game is, I'm curious to see people's reactions, because the only problem I see is that Capcom decided to show a game about dinosaurs with a character that looks decidedly close to the character or main protagonist of Dino Crisis.
Yeah.
Bold choice,
but I feel like they will eventually they'll get there. They'll get the Dino Crisis.
I'm genuinely curious. I think Exoprimal is a feeler.
Yeah.
Because as we talk about sometimes with backwards compatibility, it's a great thing. It's great to have. Sure. But it's really easy to talk that I would love backwards compatibility. It's a lot different to actually play backwards compatibility. And same things here, right? You can talk all day long about how you would love a remake of Dino Crisis. Yep. But would you actually buy it if they made it? Or would you, as soon as they showed it and anything was lightly different, would you complain that they changed something? And it's a balance, right? I think what they're trying to do is that earn goodwill. Resident Evil 2 remake, goodwill. 3 remake, a little mixed bag, mostly goodwill. Hey, Resident Evil 8 comes out, goodwill. Resident Evil 4 VR or Resident Evil 4 remake comes out, goodwill. I just think that they're trying to build that up, see if it's a fad that people can get tired of remakes, and then also use Exoprimal as an example. But
yeah,
we'll see. Moving on, though. Next piece of news, Budokai Tenkaichi is back after a very, very long break. After a streak of popular titles such as Xenoverse 1 and 2, Dragon Ball FighterZ, and the recent Kakarot, Bandai Namco have released a trailer teasing a return to the long-dormant Budokai Tenkaichi series of 3D Dragon Ball fighting games. Not much info was given in the short teaser, just showing Goku transforming into the now eponymous Super Saiyan Blue, as it cuts to a, quote, a new Budokai Tenkaichi begins, end quote. That is it. But
all right,
the hype on the internet went wild.
I'm so happy for you guys.
My first thought, I'm a little tired of Dragon Ball. I had a conversation earlier today about this. I'm tired of Dragon Ball games just being the show events retold through a set of mechanics.
Yeah.
And I really want to see them break past that. My ideal setup for Dragon Ball games would be to do what they used to do with the movies, where they're not canon, but they're really fun individual stories that you can just go out and do. Do that with the games. Give me an individual story that has its own its own stakes, its own characters, its own villains, its own arc. Sometimes they can be, characters that are related, like Cooler or, Super Android 13 or whatever it be. Using those as examples of you can create characters that are somehow tied to other characters we know about. But I think that they have abused that damn storyline of Dragon Ball Z in particular, and I'm tired of it.
Absolutely.
So Tenkaichi's at least nice that it's not doing that, right? It's just going to be a fighting game.
Yeah, I'm happy for y'all. Budokai used to be my jam back on the PS2. I'm so out of Dragon Ball that I'm just happy that it's still a thing that people are loving it still. Because
my immediate thought was, I don't know if the DualSense can handle my full adult strength cranking those fucking analog sticks to win the, when you're having a Kamehameha battle. You're like, oh, dude, fuck.
Exactly. That's going to cause a lot of drift issues, that game. So tread lightly, Budokai Tenkaichi.
One thing that people are going to have to think about that's going to be missing, the old Budokai games and Budokai Tenkaichi, they were known for having mini games as the loading screens. Loading screens won't exist anymore. That feature will be gone. That's what happens when you don't make a game since PS2.
That's right.
To that end, while we're talking about two Japanese studios series games, Kiki comes in with a pretty deep question. I think is going to be an interesting conversation here. So I hope you're ready to have a potentially difficult discussion.
Always.
He says, what do y'all think about the discourse currently plaguing Final Fantasy 16? And I decided to press to make sure that I knew which one he was referencing. And the two that I was fully aware of and that I think are getting the most traction was, of course, the JRPG terminology apparently having some issues, but also the diversity conversation around the game that has kind of been ongoing and looming to some degree since the main reveal for it.
Yeah.
So with those in mind, he actually came back and said everything. Gameplay discourse, the JRPG term being offensive to Japanese developers till this day. People feeling as though turn-based is the only thing that makes Final Fantasy a Final Fantasy game, a real Final Fantasy game, etc. Okay. So I think we got to kind of break this down a little bit.
Yeah.
Clearly, there is a lot going on to play here. So we're going to look at our main pillars. We have diversity as one, gameplay discourse as two, which I think is kind of in line with the idea of turn-based in making something a real Final Fantasy game. So I think they have three pillars. We have diversity, JRPG, and then gameplay and how that plays into people viewing it as a real or not real Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
So in order of cracking these, I think let's start off with what I think is probably the easiest one to just discuss. And it's the idea of long-running franchises and what their identity is. So the first thing I kind of want to look at is gameplay discourse and thinking about how people look at Final Fantasy and what they choose to give value as a real Final Fantasy game, at least insofar as the bubble of the internet is concerned. So I've seen that you were kind of talking about Final Fantasy 16 being something that you're excited for and you're seeing here. But as far as I understand, you don't traditionally really have a relationship with the Final Fantasy series.
No.
Right?
Yeah, I'm such a weird PlayStation fan because like there's some PlayStation games that I don't mess with. And Final Fantasy is one of them. So Final Fantasy, for me, it was just never something I was, I had to say, interested in. But just one thing led to another. Like, when you're a kid, you could get game one or game two, and I always just picked the game that wasn't Final Fantasy, and I maybe had to do with the numbers because I'm like, I've missed out on why am I jumping into 10 just because it's three pretty ladies, though that was a convincing argument for me back in the day. So I'm just gonna go play Unreal Tournament, or there were some that I got into. And not technically Final Fantasy, but Final Fantasy characters like Kingdom Hearts that I absolutely loved because it ditched that turn-based combat. So for me, just strictly as a person that doesn't have a huge experience with Final Fantasy outside the MMO, and with Final Fantasy VII Remake being the only one that I have beaten, for me, the gameplay that I saw is getting me into the door that is Final Fantasy. Because I do think that they're probably crunching the numbers and going, yeah, turn-based is a popular genre for sure, but we think we got something here with this brand that is going to help revigorate it for the masses. I think that they have something really special with this formula that it is worth changing up the quote-unquote Final Fantasy formula for. A lot of games change up the formula, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like Kratos can't jump in 2018 and in Ragnarok. He's got shitty knees. But in God of War Prior, it's a hack and slash, you know what I mean? So to me, I think the difference here is not that we haven't seen games iterate or do something different. I think also Doom is a great example of that's not necessarily the game we know Doom being, but it reinvigorated itself in such a way that it is what we think a modern Doom would play like. I think it's a drastic change, and that's what people are scared of the most, is that people are scared of change first and foremost. So they have to do a lot of convincing. And I think what Yoshi P and the directors are trying to show is, by just releasing these previews early, is showing you how much confident they are in changing the formula. And by even just allowing a demo to be had 2 weeks before the game releases is such a smart move for them to go, look, we get it. This isn't turn-based, but we're showing you why this is a numbered Final Fantasy that you're going to get into.
I think this is a really good part to interject here because I think, would you agree, at least, that you've seen Final Fantasy here and there, right?
Yep.
But would you think that part of the reason that you feel the way you do about this idea of change and this idea of turn-based being something they were moving away from, in reality, as someone who's been a Final Fantasy fan since Final Fantasy 7 was my very first one, and I played 6 and played 8 and 9 and 10. I didn't play 10 too. I fell in love with Kingdom Hearts, and it kind of went from there. I've played 12, didn't beat it, but I played it. I played 11 online. Drastic change for that series in a ton of ways. 13, I played sporadically across the series, but never finished any of the 3. So this series has been, from someone who's been a little more part of it, this series has long been known for constantly changing, right? Yeah. Even turn-based, right? They're constantly changing with what a turn-based game is, right? 7's got active time battle where you got to wait for a gauge to come up. 12 has got a version of that where it's real time in how you move, but you have to wait for your action bar to fill before you attack. And it's kind of like a weird hybrid. And then Final Fantasy VII Remake is a good example of a game that in reality is a real-time game, but there's turn-based stylings within it where you can pause the game and choose actions. And 15 was a real-time game that eventually added in the ability to pause between each action and faux turn-base it to a degree.
Yeah.
So would you think that the discourse around people online have led you to, has reinforced a potentially even false narrative, or just reinforced a dated narrative that Final Fantasy has long been turn-based, even though it's not truly been turn-based since the PS2 in a meaningful way?
I think you got something there, because you're right. From what I hear from the fan base is that there's always constant changes to the formula. It's never the same game almost twice. So to me, I think maybe that is something. We are being pushed into this realm of maybe even thinking turn-based as a more vaguer term than what we actually, or what fans actually know and expect from Final Fantasy. And it's not like, to be real, if they get it wrong here, that Final Fantasy is dead. I think with PlayStation putting the marketing rights behind this thing, it eliminates a lot of that risk. So it's not like they can't make another one and go, okay, back to basics, and that be one of the key pitches for people to get people into it or back into it. It's like, hey, listen, we learned you don't like to flip in the air or whatever have you. Back to turn-based. So yeah, I think it's one of those non-issues that Twitter or social media try to pin us up against each other, and it's not that for me.
Well, you think about the disconnect between the bubble that is Twitter and then the broader gaming sphere of people who've been Final Fantasy fans for a long time. So, this idea of making something a real Final Fantasy game, you talked about how as a kid, part of what made it a little daunting is looking and saying, whoa, 7, 8, 9? Like, whoa, I've missed 7 games. I've missed 8 games. I think that the thing that a friend let me borrow 7, and as soon as I realized that 8 was a completely different set of characters, all caution went to the wind, because it was like, oh, okay.
Yep.
100%. So I can play every single one of these games. Every one is a different world, different characters, different ideas, different. Is it going to be future based? Is it going to be like high fantasy? Is it going to be kind of old English style fantasy? Is it going to be futuristic? Is it going to have a weird blend of the two? Is it going to be a tactics based game?
Yeah.
Final Fantasy, in my opinion, is synonymous for constantly changing not only gameplay, but the whole point is that you tend to not even see the same characters. And if you do, it's because they say, well, this is 10, but this is 10-2 or 13-2 or 13-3, because it's like a sub-series of Final Fantasy.
Yep.
And to that end, I think it's really, it should be an impossibility to pigeonhole Final Fantasy. They have gone out of their way with some of the sub-games like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Final Fantasy Crisis Core, which is a 7 product. Dirge of Cerberus is like a third-person shooter Final Fantasy game on PS2. They have done everything. And if you're saying right now, and this time, in this day and age, is your time to say that because this game is real time, when Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy 15, 2 of the best-selling Final Fantasy games in the entire franchise, which were not turn-based, I think you're being a little disingenuous. Now, you can also clearly look at this and say, I miss the times when Final Fantasy was able to scratch my itch of a turn-based game with that branding and that name. But I think the best way for people to view this is that Square Enix has let that spirit live, and it lets it live in smaller studios, like the studios behind Bravely Default, studios behind Octopath Traveler 2,
which slaps,
Triangle
by the
Strategy.
way. Yeah.
Those games, if you called them Final Fantasy Octopath Traveler, there's nothing about that wouldn't make it. The thing about Final Fantasy is it's just an idea.
Yeah.
And Yoshi P talked about every game's different, and every game is the best Final Fantasy they think they can make at that moment. And the great thing about that is Final Fantasy almost doesn't have an identity. It can be anything. Square Enix put out this, it's like a tech demo to show off some of their tech. And it was like a futuristic thing where they had like an android thing fighting off this weird spirit looking thing, and it was very futuristic looking. And I was like, that would be sick if they turned that into a Final Fantasy game, because they can. There's literally nothing keeping it from happening. Final Fantasy 15 was a massive success despite plenty of issues, and yet it went on to sell 20-30 million copies, and tons of DLC and all sorts of stuff. So I think at this point, it's a weak argument. It doesn't really go into anything. And all it is I feel left out of a conversation because I wish my franchise was this. And I can understand that, and I can feel with that, and I can even empathize with it. But your games exist elsewhere in Square Enix, and they just don't have the Final Fantasy naming. And you know what? Maybe one of these days soon, Square will go, we're going to do a different style. Like I'm assuming what's happening here is people are really wanting a game like Final Fantasy X again, where they're pushing the boundary of 3D graphics and everything, and still doing all that, but then still being turn-based. And it'll happen. It will almost undoubtedly happen, but give it time. Let it do its thing. Every Final Fantasy game will be its thing. And as much as people love turn-based, it has grown to be a niche. And when you're doing a AAA level game, I'm assuming part of what's happening is that the people working at that level know that it's not going to be viable at that level. And I could be wrong, and I would love to be proven wrong and have a very massively successful turn-based game. But I think numbers time and again have proved that that's just not going to be the case.
Absolutely.
So let them serve both entities. Let them make their Octopaths and their Bravely Defaults
Give them a shot.
and their Diofield Chronicles. Let them do that. And then let them take their biggest franchise, one of their biggest franchises in Final Fantasy, and make sure that those games continue to sell buku so that they can keep making those little experimental games that you might love so much.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I just think no way to pigeonhole Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
And if you're saying that it can't be a real Final Fantasy without it, then maybe you're not a real Final Fantasy fan. Maybe you're a Final Fantasy maybe you're a Final Fantasy 7 fan. Maybe you're a Final Fantasy 8 fan. Maybe you're a Final Fantasy turn-based fan. But that doesn't make the people who are Final Fantasy 15, 12, 11, 14, doesn't make any of them less fans. All right, moving along.
I'll fight you in the streets if you say different.
Let's go. Moving along, I think the next one to kind of tackle, because one thing I would say, the only identity that I really think matters is that Final Fantasy games always feel, in my opinion, and this is fair to put out there, I think the thing is that they always feel like, even when they're about the West, like, Final Fantasy 16 is a very Western-driven game. It's looking at kind of European ideas and this medieval kind of idea, a very Games of Thrones-y. It's like it's trying to do that kind of look. So, but even when it is, it's like looking at Western media through the lens of Japanese culture and how they view it externally. And I've always liked that because it is interesting. Like Final Fantasy 7 is a very Western idea of a city and game and how things interact, but you're seeing it through the lens of a Japanese studio. So with that in mind, the term JRPG being offensive is, first and foremost, you learn something every day. This is news to me.
Yeah. I've
been calling them JRPGs my
whole
life. Since I really understood what a genre was,
Yeah.
Like Final Fantasy X and Kingdom Hearts 1 is probably when I started using the word JRPG.
Sure.
So first thing to talk about is the idea of something being offensive and where that comes from and what that means. So I think first and foremost, for anyone who doesn't know, Yoshi P talked about the terminology of JRPG sounding demeaning because he felt like it otherized Japanese-made RPG games and tried putting them into a separate category, and that they couldn't just be RPGs, they had to be Japanese. And they took that as a stigmatization toward those games. And as someone who didn't have that lens and wasn't there, it is interesting to hear because I've lived an entire life of never really hearing it be used in a pejorative way.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it can't be taken as such. So it's interesting. Joe, do you have any kind of run-ins that you've done where
I'm so goddamn offended right now?
Have you ever heard someone use it in a way where they like threw some stank on it?
No, let me put the serious hat on. So here's how I categorize a JRPG or an RPG in general, whatever. Western to Japanese style games, right? First, it's so I've had a lot of a learning experience with, people kind of bringing this up to me in one of the posts that I made, where it's just like, we the one thing that the games media does a lot is they're just like, hey, let's take, for example, we'll make an article about like the lack of diversity in Final Fantasy 16, right? And it's true, like out of all the promo art, like you don't see any people of color in those trailers, right? So it's a fair question to raise. But if you're going to raise that question, don't be afraid to ask it in front of those people, right? Don't just get the press release. Do the journalism thing. Ask the hard question at the press event. And I feel like a lot of people they'll write their think pieces far and away from a press junket, as it were, because they're afraid to get blacklisted and blackballed, because at the end of the day, content is king. So I want to just shout out to the folks that did ask the hard questions there, that didn't just go, you know what, I'll Kotaku this and save it for a slow news day. That said, when I think of a JRPG, I never thought of it as a negative thing. To me, I think of a JRPG the same I think of, restaurants or movies even, right? Where like if I go into a McDonald's and they're, serving me sushi, to me, I'm going to think that's all fucked up. I'm coming in here for a burger, right? If I'm coming into an Italian restaurant and I'm leaving with a hamburger, something went dangerously wrong. So when, we talk about culture, it plays a huge part in just everything, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to art, when it comes to food, everything, culture, and the differences in our cultures are what makes us so unique and so interesting as well. But what I've learned in this conversation is when I close my eyes and I think of a JRPG, I am thinking of something that is turn-based, right? I am thinking something that is, has a party system. I'm thinking of something that has, robust mini game mechanics or romance options, mini games that are going to have me in for the long haul, 100+ hour stories, that type of stuff. When I close my eyes, that's what I think about a JRPG. And then I put it in the JRPG box, right? And I close it up and I seal it away. That's what I'm thinking about when I think of a JRPG. I'm thinking of Persona, but you may close your eyes and think Final Fantasy VII, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also have to be cognizantly aware of what we put in those boxes when we're thinking of something that we don't like about a JRPG, and not make it because it's about, Japan or the Japanese culture, but maybe it's just a mechanic you don't appreciate. Because I think one of the most important things about a JRPG is the culture of Japan infused in those games. The thing about Eastern culture that is awesome, that it's always about we, us, instead of me and I. And you get that time and time again sewn into these games of bettering your fellow man. And so to me, I never used JRPG as a way to demean Japanese people. So in a way, I was just like, come on, guys, what are we doing here? Come on. Like, this must be a slow news day. And then I saw what they were talking about through a G4 skit where they're talking about, and it's really, guys, it's pretty wild what they say in here and what they're able to do. It goes to show, wow, we have come such a far way, because like they were like talking in Japanese accents. They were like throwing like, Kim Jong-un like in there with like other popular like Japanese people. Like it was crazy what they were doing. And they were talking about how this game was just too Japanesey, right? And that's a term that I've used, and I've heard thrown around where it's just like, yeah, this game's too Japanese for me. Well, what the fuck does that really mean, right? So to me, I'm like, okay, I can definitely see where people toss around the word JRPG or toss around the word of like, it's too Japanese, and go, okay, but what is too Japanese, right? So like, when I say we got to be careful about what we're putting in those boxes, is we may be subconsciously putting in stereotypes in those boxes as well, right? So to me, though I've never used the term JRPG in a negative way, and I will keep referring to those games as JRPGs, or games that follow that lineage as JRPGs. I can understand now why people go, yeah, I don't like that term because it should just be RPG. But again, the way I see it is we're approaching a future where we're going to see more South Korean developers, Indian developers, African developers. We're seeing a big blow up right now in Eastern European games.
China in particular has been very big.
China as well. So we're going to see what an Indian RPG, how it looks, feels, and how that culture impacts the genre in really interesting ways.
I think that's where it starts to get to me. Like, I guess I have two utilitarian purposes for it.
Yeah.
Like, I tend to use it as specifically like, okay, there are games that have these types of qualities, tend to. And so even if it doesn't check every one of those marks, it checks enough marks to where the usefulness of being able to categorize it as a JRPG helps me understand where it fits within my head and the potential of me liking something about it. Because I do like what I consider to be JRPGs, but there's a level. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are the ideas that they're going? And sometimes I like it when they blend them, but sometimes I don't like it when it's too prominent of one thing. And that same thing could be said elsewhere. But I'm looking at that totally as JRPGs as being one more subcategory to help me categorize something.
Because we like to conceptualize.
Of course. And you see it in music where it's like genres in music are crazy. Yeah. And realistically, people try and find ways to like, well, I'm actually, I'm post-hardcore. Okay, just back up. It's like, come on, man. Yeah. Realistically, you're a version of rock or you're a version of metal. It's like, yeah, you can go into the weeds, and the weeds do help, right? If you say I like hardcore music, well, there's probably going to be a few bands that you think of like, okay, post-hardcore, what do I have? And then bam, 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 you got a couple title fight, bam, bam, you throw a couple fights out, a couple of bands out there, and you've got it. And the same is true of games, right? If you say, and I see this happen with, and I guess that's what I mean. So as a descriptor, the only difference I'm finding is that you can use it to where you're looking at it and you're saying this set of things is something everyone's agreed is Japanese RPG, so that's what we do. And how is that any different in this sense, right? You think of that and you go, well, that's not any different than saying it's an action RPG. It's an ARPG. And you say, well, that helps me know that it's a type of RPG that is not turn-based focused. And instead, it is focused on me being in constant control of the character and combating in real time in a way that is more action-driven than you would typically see in a turn-based game. Yeah. And bam, you have a new subcategorization. So when you think of it that way, it just feels like it's another distinction. But then you start to think about, well, can it clash? Like, well, what happens? Like, Forspoken is a Japanese-made RPG, and it's an action RPG. So is it an AJRPG? Or is it just an ARPG? And then that starts to be like, well, I guess the Japanese part of it, I think the weirdness of it comes from the fact that one is a descriptor insofar as an idea. Action's a concept.
Yes.
Japanese is a culture and a place that people connect with on a more interpersonal level. You wouldn't consider yourself like, people are like, I'm an action head, I love action movies. Yeah, but you wouldn't consider that like, you wouldn't find a large group of people, most people wouldn't, that consider that to be a defining characteristics of who they are. And it starts to get kind of weird, like when you think about that, because I didn't, but as we've been sitting and talking, I've been thinking like, I mean, ARPG, and then, okay, well, how does that blend in with JRPG? Because it can be an ARPG that's not made in Japan, or it can be an ARPG that is made in Japan. And at some point, Does a Japanese moniker really matter? I think at the end of the day, for me, I can understand that this apparently has been something that not everyone in Japan has agreed on and liked, and I can sympathize with that. And I never thought of it that way, but I'm a big intent guy, and I think that there's a lot to be said where I think if people have been saying JRPG in a loving way and not meaning it in any kind of way that's meant to try and act as a negative or to try and put something in a unfair box, I think that it's an unfortunate reality that it may be offensive to someone, but I didn't say it with the intent to be offensive.
Yeah.
And so from here, it's just a thing of, do you try and push past that, and do we try to eliminate the terminology of JRPG, or do we live with it while knowing it's... Go ahead.
Yeah, and not because it's necessarily, because I think the one thing we're kind of also hitting at is like, words change, words have meaning, words also become outdated, and we might be running into a point where it's like, yeah, maybe we should drop it because it's no longer a good descriptor, because we forgot the elephant in the room that is From Software. From Software is a Japanese, developer that is making some of the best RPGs on the market right now in Elden Ring and From Software. They don't hit any of those boxes that we talked about.
Yeah, they don't hit. The average person doesn't think JRPG. To be fair to my use of JRPG, I do view those games as JRPGs.
Yeah.
But I think that that's also in the most utilitarian sense. My brain is, it's an RPG. It's made in Japan, Japanese RPG.
Yeah.
No negativity, no stink, just local. Like, where is it coming? Where the people who are working on this game, what's their culture? Because that does impact the way the game turns out. Like you talked about, when we eventually do get games from, like we're seeing some of the games coming out of China, right? We're seeing like Black Myth Wukong. It's very driven by Chinese culture and Chinese lore and myth, and that's cool. And it will have some impact on it, but at the end of the day, can you really say that like turn-based is if you want to, I guess you probably can, but turn-based is not inherently Japanese, and being Japanese does not inherently mean that it's going to be turn-based. Yes, there may be a disproportionate amount of Japanese games that chose to be turn-based, but that's also because a lot of games were coming out of Japan at first in the resurgence of gaming. And so they set that pace. Yeah. So part of you feels like, as much as you can understand, I think while there's some people that probably did give it that moniker as stink, I think sometimes it's people gave it like almost as like an homage for like, you set the pace. You did this, and this is like, so when we see these mechanics, we think about the fact that this was really spearheaded in Japan.
I know like there are several indie games that are like, this is inspired by the JRPGs of old, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's to me, it's more like a subcategory of a subcategory. Because even when we're talking about Polish developers, right? Again, Poland is becoming a huge scene. Eastern Europe becoming a huge scene in game development. Witcher being one of them. This is a game made by and crafted by a Polish studio about a Polish author's world. That culture, you could see it's enhanced by it because it's literally their home turf. And that means something. So to me, I'm right there with you. It's about the intent, but I'm also going to change the way I use it, because there's been times where I'm just like, again, because I'm not perfect and I'm not claiming to be, and I'm not gonna whatever. But like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's too Japanese for me. That's crazy. I'm out. Well, what do I mean by that? Is it because
fair point? You should be able to ask yourself.
Yeah, they're yelling a whole bunch of gibberish and shooting a laser beam out of their hand. Why is that weird to me? I'll get it, because I see that shit all the time out of Iron Man. He's saying some wacky shit and shooting a beam out of his hand, and I'm not thinking anything of it. So,
it goes back into my thing where, and people feel different ways, and I know this can be strongly viewed, but like, I've always thought of like anime is a really good comparison point here, because a lot of people would tell you like anime is very Japanese predominant, right? When you think of the term anime, you think of Japanese animation. But I like to think of, like, when we talk about it as a subcategory, I think if you look at what these things are and you think about what drives the thought processes behind them and what they're doing, for me personally, I've always kind of viewed Avatar: The Last Airbender as a anime.
Yeah. And a lot of folks,
it's completely done by a Western. It was created by, Western people and done by Western studios with some help of, contracted studios. But the point being, at the end of the day, why can't it be an anime? But it depends on what you mean by anime, right? Are we just saying, like, these are things that we expect from anime and it ticks those boxes? Or is there a cultural reverence for saying anime should be given the ability to be focused around Japanese created stuff because that type of animation was handled by them? And I don't know the answer, but I tend to think, as long as you're not saying these things with negative intent behind them, most people are going to see the good in you. We talked, we had a little interaction on Twitter about the internet being the worst for people assuming the worst of you. And they don't come from a point of thinking that you may have meant nothing by it. You may have not even thought about that. And that doesn't mean that there's nothing. It doesn't mean that you're not wrong for saying it. Maybe you are. But did you mean to? And what do you mean? What did you actually think about that, right? What was here's your opinion, right? Maybe we're talking about opinion. Here's your opinion. What's the meat of that opinion? You're looking at the surface. What is the meat of that opinion? What fuels that opinion? Well, how did I get there? And people don't give the benefit of the doubt online for that. No. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And again, at the end of the day, it's such a layered conversation. And I do think we got to give people breathing room around it. And look, I came into this conversation going like, all right, here we go again. Everybody's upset about something, to going, oh wow, no. I can see why people would be upset. And they're right to feel that way. But again, intent's important. And so if you want to keep using JRPG, that's fine. And if you don't, if you're like, yeah, you know what, maybe I don't need to use it, and maybe it's outdated for the sake of it being maybe offensive, or maybe just going, yeah, it's no longer a good descriptor of a game. That's fair.
If nothing else, right? The people that it's because it is JRPG and the J stands for Japan, Japanese. The one thing that should at least be true, and I'm appreciative that for the most part, it seems to be that people are allowing this, regardless of how you feel about the use and what your intent was. The people who feel like it impacts them, and the Japanese people being a very clear point here, so Japanese developers, they should have at least the ability to express that, hey, this isn't something we were very comfortable with. And it does sound like, from what he's saying, it's less of an issue now than it was initially. And that initially, it's hard to understand the motivation behind the otherization of clarifying it as a Japanese RPG. And is it because of negative motivations? And while we may all know now that we don't carry that intent, we can't say that part of that terminology being grounded up wasn't because they wanted to otherize and say, well, this is a JRPG. You know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
But they should be able to say, hey, this is something that we either still view as, offensive, or at one point in time, we didn't view it in the best positive light, without being told that they're wrong, because they have every right to feel the way they feel, just like we have every right to feel the way we feel, and to say the words that we want to say with the intent that we want to give behind them.
Absolutely.
The last one, and probably the most tricky one, diversity in Final Fantasy. And I think it's an interesting conversation to come up now specifically. And I think it really goes to show a lot about how much marketing push Final Fantasy 16 is getting. I would tell you that Final Fantasy is not long known for being incredibly diverse. It just isn't. And I would honestly say that a lot of Square Enix games in particular are not known for being incredibly diverse, in the sense of having things that you feel like are touchstones in reality. Like you can say Final Fantasy X is diverse within its own world because they have, a guy that kind of looks like a walking, bipedal cat guy.
Sure.
And you have Waka, who's clearly like an islander kind of person. And so that's pretty good. You got women, of course, with Yuna and Lulu and all those different people going in. And you have, I guess you have women bad guys. You have Unaleska and Seymour. You have all these different things. But they're diverse. They've always been diverse, in my opinion, insofar as they are diverse in fantastical ways. They're diverse in how they choose to show you the mix of people within this fake world. And that's easier said when you have games that have touchstones like Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy IX with people like Zidane, where he's got like a tail and you're like, okay, I don't know what the fuck's going on, but this is the world we live in. Yeah. But this game, because it's aiming towards something so much more realistic, as 15 was as well, more realistic representation, less fantastical creatures in terms of what you're seeing as humanity within the game is more human looking driven and less fantasy. So with that in mind, why now is an interesting question. And it doesn't mean that the comment of diversity is any less prevalent or less important because of it. But it is interesting that it's happening now and not even, 5 years ago when in 2017 or whatever, when Final Fantasy 15 came out and had ostensibly the same problem. And then secondarily, this is a conversation I'm always curious about with anyone who considers himself creative. And the same thing happened with John Garvin in Days Gone. This idea that people who are writing and creating and telling a story they want to tell, is it wrong for them to create something and create something within what they feel like they know and what they feel comfortable with and what they think up in their head? If for some reason it ends up not being diverse, is it wrong? And, Days Gone got a lot of backlash for the same thing when, ironically, if you play more into Days Gone, there's a lesbian couple. There's plenty of colored people within that world and that game. There's plenty of women. People were saying how it's just white male the game. And ironically, just the protagonist is not the only character that matters in any story, right? There are other characters that play into play. So it was an interesting conversation around that too. And I'm not going to say I can't have an opinion as a white person, because clearly everyone can have an opinion and they should be able to have an opinion. But my opinion is clearly going to be skewed by the fact that I am white. I don't, and that's why when people bring up the thing, right, of, well, you see yourself in media. And I suppose that's true. I'm not trying to deny that. Of course I see myself in media. I think the difference is, even if there's reason as to why the other people feel the way they do, I have never felt like, and the argument is because I've always seen it enough that I never had to worry about feeling it. I can play a game as a black girl and feel just as connected to her as I can anything, because I want to connect with that character whenever I'm experiencing media. I don't tend to put myself, I'm not the character. The character is the character. And I want to experience that world and their things as they are, regardless of who they are, right?
Yeah.
I don't play Horizon and think of myself as Aloy. I'm not Aloy. I'm not a girl who grew up alone with only one person and who was called a reject most of her life and was considered an outsider.
And a ginger.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a ginger. Why would I even want? And I bring that up. Like, for me, I don't. There's value in playing things that you do have touchstones for, but there's a lot more value for me personally to play things where I don't feel like I know them. I play Nier Automata. I don't know what it's like to be an android, and I don't want to spoil the story, so I won't go too much further than that. But to be an android who's positioned, who is supposed to be keeping humanity alive as they stay safe on the moon, waiting for the day they can return to Earth. I don't know what that's like, but that's what makes it inviting and interesting. I've never been Deacon. I've never been a guy who rides around in a motorcycle group, real rough and tough and has a bunch of tattoos and had this girl that, a crazy event busted out and then she's missing and disappeared and as far as she's dead. I've never had that, but that's what makes drawing. So that's one side of the coin. But the flip side of the coin is, what is the value of seeing yourself? And again, coming from being, I guess, ostensibly of the class of people who are privileged to have seen themselves in there, I don't like character creators in games typically. I want to play a character someone thought of and wrote, because character creators inherently mean the story can't be personal, because they have to account for you potentially being a red guy who looks like the devil from Cow and Chicken. And so I play off of that all the time. So, I mean, and I guess, Chris is this too, right? And I do, sometimes I have conversations with Chris where I'm like, what do you feel? Like, you are a person of color. You have skin in this game, quite literally, in a way that I can't. And I don't think my opinion is completely unimportant, and nor do I think my opinion doesn't matter at all, or whatever it be. I can certainly have one. But I think your opinion does carry considerations that may just not enter the brain of someone. Like, being a guy, my wife tells me all the time, like, some of the things I think about and worry about are things she would never even have thought to worry about, because she's a girl and she just doesn't think about those things, because it's a different set of things. And I don't think about the things that she has to worry about sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So for you, I mean, what's your stance on this? I mean, I know that you brought it up and how I think you even said, like, you would like to see diversity, but I think going into the idea, what do you feel about the idea of diversity as far as it goes into the creative process? And I guess what I'm really asking is, should someone feel forced to write something in that they're not truly feeling just to meet that criteria? Or should it not be viewed that way by the creator? Should it be, I want a diverse world, so let me reach out and find other people that I can lean on in this creative process who can give me insights so that I can make characters that are like them? Or should the creative process just be true to what it is? Go with what you're feeling inside, create what you know, write what you know, and as long as it's good, let the rest be damned. What are your thoughts?
Believe diversity was an old wooden ship. No, I was waiting a bit for that one. Look, I'm kind of the same with you, right? Some of my favorite characters of all time wear masks and wear helmets, like the Master Chief, like Spider-Man. I never understood why. When people were like, "Who's your favorite superhero?" I was like, I don't know. Like, I like them all, I guess. Like, Iron Man's cool. I also like Captain, but like, I never had like that strong like connection until Into the Spider-Verse, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, it made sense. Where Into the Spider-Verse is about a half black, half Puerto Rican kid who becomes his version of Spider-Man, right? Mm-hmm. And there is a scene in that movie that I connected with. And it was something really simple of his mom's hooting and hollering in the kitchen. She's speaking Spanish. She's speaking like English and Spanish, Spanglish a little bit. And he's running into the kitchen and there's a pot on there. And it's like, it's a Spanish stew. And I notice it by just the potato chunks and the chorizo that's floating in there. He takes a sip and he runs out. And all of a sudden I felt something I never felt ever in Medium. Whereas it's like all of a sudden I saw a character that would do something similar to what I would do in that situation as a Hispanic, as a Latino, as a Puerto Rican. I saw an environment that was perfectly how I would think it. And all of a sudden I was like, that's what this is. That's why diversity is important. It's not the fact that I'll never be Aloy, unfortunately, but I know that there's characters that in that universe that people love, like Zoe is a great example, that vibe with her in a different way that means something even deeper than them because they look like them, right? Or they sound like them, or sound like someone they know. So it's always important when creating a world that there's a little something for everyone. it doesn't mean, because Hollywood gets into this. It's like, all right, so we're making a movie. It's in Harlem. Get me a white dude, a Puerto Rican gal, a black dude, and a Polish guy. And it's like, that's not, we can't do it by filling a quota and checking it off. It has to come naturally. So part of it is like, yeah, it doesn't, in truth, like Lord of the Rings, very white films. They're fantastic. Very white books. Very good books.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't matter if we see a black elf, right? But some people made that an issue.
I'll definitely give you that, right? The flip side exists too.
Yeah.
Right? If it exists as it was written by Tolkien, where it's not really, that's not the way it's written, though it's also, interestingly enough, it's not the way it's written.
Exactly. It's just ignored. That's the thing.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, the whiteness of those films comes from the fact that he was a white guy who lived a white life. And this is very similar to the John Garvin story, right? Where he's talking about like, I wrote a white character and a white guy because I'm white and I know like that's the life I've lived. Like and I really truly mean this. If you are writing a project, depending on what the project is, I don't really think like, you should write like your version of something. Like, all stuff is, all fantasy, all fiction is painted by your experience through the lens of something that is clearly not realistic. That's the whole purpose of fiction. And the fun of that is that you get to take and this is a word that carries a lot of interesting weight because it got thrown around in some odd ways, but the actual idea of a lived experience, right? So like your lived experience is you. It's everyone has a lived experience and no one's is the same, right? And with that in mind, that's what makes writing and creating fun. Like when you're writing a song and you're writing lyrics, you're like, I've never really written a song that was 100% to the T, maybe once, where it was me bleeding out into the paper without a doubt. It's almost always that I'm embellishing. I'm finding ways to view the song as a story. And I'm like, okay, well, in this story, this would happen and this would be a little bit bigger than what actually happened to me. And that will create, but I can still think about the emotions about that, and I can write into that. And so you think about all that. Go ahead.
It has to. So one part of it is a shared experience, right? So like a perfect example, right? Tolkien. He's a white dude who lived in a majority white like neighborhood, town, country, all that jazz. So he didn't get to have those experiences. Mm-hmm. So he didn't have to think about that because his readers also were white dudes, right? And I know I'm painting with a very broad or very exact brush, but when we're talking about demographics changing,
drastically. And we're talking about the ability for a book to be drastically, it's much easier to read Tolkien now than it was.
Yeah. And to me, it's easier than ever to get a fresh perspective when you're building these worlds out. What do those worlds feel genuine, or do they feel like they're portraying folks in the right matters? Lovecraft is has inspired my favorite game of all time, which is Bloodborne. But when he would describe anybody that wasn't white, he described them as savages. Yeah. And he was very openly racist. And so when I think of, Miles Morales was written by a white man, but his experiences, he has two black kids. Yeah. And he wanted a Spider-Man that they could look up to.
And what I like about that is, right, he's bleeding his experience, right? He is bleeding the experience of a mixed household, a mixed couple, and then he's thinking about the experience that he's sharing with these kids, and he's using that to fuel his fiction. Yep. And that's kind of what I mean, is he's not pulling that out of his ass. He's looking at something that he has exact experience with, right? Yep. And that's one of the interesting things, like, right, white people don't exist in a vacuum. I grew up until the seventh grade, I basically had no white friends. Yeah. And so a lot of my younger things that were driven by the fact that I had primarily black and Mexican. And I say this word knowing that some people view it offensively, but that's literally what they called themselves. So it's what we did. They called themselves gypsies, right? and they lived around there. And that was primarily the school that I went to. I lived out in the country. It was the closest school to us. And that area of our town is primarily Black and Mexican. And, that's where we are. And gypsy families as well. So that's what I grew up around. And so there's times where I notice some of the people that like some of my friends now, some of my white friends, where I'm around people or I'm around situations and I can tell that they've never been around it.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I'm like, here's a weird experience that I got just because of how my life happened to play out.
Yeah.
And it only happened because I was surrounded by different people. So that's a great thing. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I could go and I could probably to some degree, like if I say right now, if I were to write fiction, I would have, because I think of people in my head, right? Like that's the big thing. A lot of fiction's fueled by people you know. You create a character because it's like your version of someone that you know, and you exaggerate some of their traits, their best traits, their worst traits, and you push them out. So I have all sorts of people I grew up with, and I have a wealth of people who do look like a very broad variety of people, and that is great. But for people who don't, I don't really think that I would look at that and say you're doing something wrong because you're not putting this in. And I'm glad that it seems like that's where you're coming from as well.
And exactly. It can't be like, I'm putting this in here because PR told me to. It has to come from a genuine place, and it should come through a genuine place.
And you'll feel it.
Yeah, you'll feel it. To me, when I think of Game of Thrones, which, this is, Final Fantasy 16 is inspired by some parts. I think about, oh my God, I think they're called I'm confusing Harry Potter lore for a second, but the
Dementors, they were everywhere.
The Dementors. That's the worst part about prison. But like Pedro Pascal's character and their culture, they're representing the Spanish kingdoms, right? That's how George Railroad Martin thought of it, and they're not walking around going, doing like I don't know. They're not all talking like my abuela. They're talking like Spaniards would, right? Yeah. They have an accent, but it's not over exaggerated. There's not a mariachi band surrounding them. It's grounded. It's realistic. It feels like there's a respect owed to the culture rather than going, what do I think a Spanish person likes, and doing that. So to me, that's what it is. When we're approaching something, it has to be genuine, but it also has to be approached with respect rather than here's a very surface level observation. So when I take a look at the Final Fantasy game, right, to get back to this point, and I go, oh yeah, that's a weird choice because the gaming industry has become so much more diverse and aware as well, which it does seem like it is a bit of a miss, but I'm still buying that game day one. It looks great. I'm in for it. I can't summon lightning from a sword, so I'm into being Clive, but I can also be aware of that was a unfortunate miss because I know that there are, so many, Black folks that take after so much, we talk about cultures converging, Black culture and Japanese culture, man, they blend so well with each other and complement each other so well. And when I think of things like manga, or I think of things like anime, why did I say anime like that? I think of people like Michael B. Jordan, who just made a successful movie with Creed 3 going, this is inspired by was it Naruto? A lot of this. I think of people like the movie Nope, right? Like Jordan Peele, he was just I wanted to do the Akira slide. So I made a scene where Kiki Palmer does the Akira slide.
So good.
It's so good. So there are just so many things that to me, it does feel like a miss. And it's there's an opportunity to have someone here that could have made the cut. You know what I mean? That could have fit. But this is the creator's vision. They also get to create the thing that they want. And if sadly, if that means there's no people of color in here, all right, then that's what it is. But it's also called Final Fantasy, where we're summoning phoenixes in the air. So I don't feel like that's I don't think anything's lost if we added one person to be like a Puerto Rican guy. I don't know. So
No,
I understand both sides. I totally understand, because we want to create a better medium that we could see ourselves in and also each other in. And we also got to respect the writing process as well, because sometimes the creative process gets in sometimes the creative process, things get in the way of it, like the color by numbers, right? That's the problem. It gets overly produced. And you
feel that in every fiber. When it's actually made that way, you feel it. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's too obvious. It's like, okay, no one made this with care. They tried to make sure that they fit every type of person in.
Real talk, it's like in the mid-2000s, it's like everybody needs a sassy gay friend in a sitcom. And now, like, you're like, well, that's not like actually how gay people operate. And we're seeing like awesome queer characters and things. Like, I'm watching right now a show called Shrinking, right? It's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. With Jason Segel, right?
Yeah. Oh, so good. He has a gay best friend in there, and he's gay, and he's a bit flamboyant, but he's not a typical, stereotyped gay person. He's
not Will and Grace, because that was like every show was like modeled themselves after Will and Grace.
Exactly. He's a person with feelings, thoughts, and you care for them, and you could see their struggle with you as well, right?
For sure.
So like, they have to feel like people when you're writing a character. It has to feel genuine, and you have to you have to do the research as well. Again, George R.R. Martin does the research. Game of Thrones is about the War of Roses and European or British history, and a lot of that when we talk about the outside nations, when they bring in like Spanish culture, he's talking about, okay, so what did Spain look like during this time period? And he's doing the work to make it so. So to me, it's all about having the creator create what they want, but it is also fair to critique it if it's, again, in the age of 2023, if all I'm seeing is a bunch of white dudes, all right, well, that's a bit of a bummer, but I'm not going to score it negatively because of that. Unless it's just like, hey guys, we're going to the rally afterwards. Like, whoa, which one? What? Like,
no rallies. It's a Southern restaurant with bomb French fries. Don't worry about it.
And they're like, oh, but yeah. So like, to me, that's the importance is, I believe diversity is important in things. I want to see everybody see something in a piece of medium, because I know what that feeling is for the first time in 20 plus years. There was problems with Joel being, Hispanic in the show. It's like, why? It's like, well, because he's what? But like, okay. And look, he's a fantastic Joel. So again, and there's also another level of like Ellie's character. Ellie is, spoiler alert, queer, and so is the person portraying Ellie. So it's like they get it a little extra. So to me, it's about, maybe as I'm workshopping it in my mind, it's about the creator going the extra level for fans outside of their own purview.
Yeah, which if they choose to partake in is 100% great and supported, and I think that's great. Like, just for the sake
so
of
there's critiques on both sides too, like
100%. Yeah. And Spider-Verse, just to throw this out there, Spider-Verse is one of my favorite films of all time. And I'm not Black, I'm not Puerto Rican. It doesn't matter. That movie is phenomenal. I'm glad that you had that extra level of thing in there. But, it is a really interesting thing for me to hear, like, oh, you think of that. I mean, there's an extra level of, I guess, you probably are more familiar with the actual suit. But I think of myself, I like that because I think a lot of people could see themselves in Miles, whether they share anything with him or not. Yeah. In that, like, what they share with him might be that they go outside, they go outside their room and they grab it. But you have an extra layer with it, right? Like, exactly. I think of, I'm like, that's exactly what I'd do. I'd run by, you're in a rush, you're a teenager, you live a busy life. Your parents are trying to take care of you. And what do we do as teenagers? You do the bare minimum to make your parents think that you're going to be okay. So you grab some food, you get going, and your life's more important. So, but you get that extra layer. But I guess to finalize my point on for specifically how I feel about Final Fantasy 16 and the idea around diversity in any form of media, I think the solution is, like you said, it should never be color by numbers. And I think the danger of treating the conversation with not the right gloves for it is that you push creators when you overly criticize when they don't do it. You push creators into feeling like the only way to still interact and operate within the creative market is to color by numbers so that they don't have to worry about this next time they create. And I think that only leads to less inspired and less, realistically thought out and created stories and characters, because you start to worry about external forces and external pressures.
Absolutely.
My solution that I really think it's the best overall solution is we need to do everything we can to remove any barriers that may exist. And I would look and say that there are very few barriers, but someone else may disagree, and I'd be glad to at least have that conversation and hear it out. But as many barriers as possible moving out, and to inspire more people who are of the people that they feel like are not represented enough. So people who may be Puerto Rican, people who may be Black, people who may be any form of Latin descent. You can be maybe Japanese people, Chinese people, whatever it be. If you're an atheist, if you're a Christian and you don't feel like you see enough of that, if you feel like you don't see enough of your sexuality, push. And this isn't me saying that every single person has to do this, right? If you're gay and you want to see gay people in video games, you don't have to go and make that game. But if we try and create a series, a platform, a series of events where people who are those things could feel inspired to create and can find ways to get supported, to get lifted up to creator status, then you see those things in a natural and genuine way that you can connect with more often by nature of there being more of that in the creative field. Conversely, the people who try and immediately criticize anything will go, oh, well, this is full of this people. It's got to be that they're coloring by the numbers. You got to let that go. You've got to be willing to let things that are diverse be diverse just because they are, not because someone felt pressure. And you've got to let things that aren't diverse be not diverse, not because they purposely excluded someone, but because they genuinely made something that they thought was in their head, this is their child. Just because they didn't think about exactly who you are does not mean they have hate towards you, ill will against you. It's not that. If we can let both of those things happen simultaneously and stop criticizing every time something does anything from both sides, we'll be in a better place. Because at the end of the day, while I understand, are you character purism as an idea, right? You talked about Joel and Pedro and how they added that, and how Sarah is a mixed child, if I'm not mistaken, in the show. Spoiler alert, in case you didn't know, I'm not watching the show.
Oh, really?
No, and not for any strong reason. I don't have enough time. I just recently played the remake. My wife is not like I told her if she's interested, I will watch it with her. No problems. Crazy. But I don't have enough personal drive to watch it because I know the story very well. And so I'm sure it's full of wonderful performances and everything. But at the end of the day, it is... At the end of the day, it is just another telling of a very similar bone-structured story that one day I may watch, but it's not at the front of my list. But when people do that, I have my own things. Like, I've been pointing to it a lot lately, but Velma, the HBO Max series, has gotten a lot of flack from people because there comes a point where you have to say the crossroads is, what is the value of a character? What is the value of what you look at in a character? And how much can you pull and push and stretch that and change things before you start to lose the character? And all you have is a visual and a name that match this person, but otherwise it's not them. And I think Velma was a really big example of that, because whether or not it's good or bad, I think the problem people had is you've been watching Scooby-Doo your whole life, and the kind of person that Velma is and Daphne is as a character.
And suddenly they're not those things. So I think that there comes this thing of where you look and you go, okay, well, Velma is Indian, if I'm not mistaken, in the show, because it was modeled after Mindy Kaling. And you go, okay, maybe that's easy enough to let go. Her color doesn't matter.
But what does come into play is that when you couple that with her being really snarky and snappy and kind of overly playful, it's like, hold on, that's not Velma. Velma wouldn't be on the phone with a ghost face killer making jokes about something. That's not who Velma is. Like that's closer to Daphne, maybe. But okay, so why did you make this character Velma? And at what point have you lost who Velma is as a character, and all you've done is given her wardrobe and her name to a new character that has different motivations and different personality traits, and then you gave it that. And so I think people look at that with Joel and with Sarah, and they look and go, well, hold on, wait a minute. I've seen other times before where changing this one aspect is indicative of changing other aspects with no care. And that doesn't have to be the case, right? I'm fairly positive that most of what's been done. I know one thing in particular about the Last of Us show that I saw a scene out of context, but it doesn't matter because I feel like the scene, even in a vacuum, there is no way you can convince me that is Ellie. I won't. We can talk about it more after the show. I don't want to spoil for anyone who's watching, but I thought it was a very weird character choice, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. But there is,
she's Ellie. No doubt in my mind.
Our earlier show, and it's the only thing, right? And if it's the only thing, it's not a huge deal. But I think it's
gotcha.
I think it's an interesting creative choice, and they have the freedom to do with their characters as they will. But it is what it is. All right, now that we've got that one pegged down, I think we kind of I think we may have solved the world's problems. I'm kidding, but that was an in-depth one. So thank you for joining me on that. I mean, a lot of weird discussions, and I really do appreciate that. I love Saul to death. He's one of my best friends. Still see him multiple times a week. I think that that's a conversation that gets taken a lot less seriously if it's made by two white guys. Even if we got to the exact same point that me and you just did, there is the fact that there is not that other thought process in here. So I really enjoy having Chris and you and people who I feel like I can be comfortable with, who I can bounce these things off of, and we can really take a second for me to learn something, for you to learn. This is everyone who's involved in this from a real, truly creative and constructive place is going to walk away having learned something about the other person.
And also, if there's something you want to add, put them in the comments. We want to know. I always say, like, there's perspectives that I don't get. I'm always open to the dialogue. I'm not taking it as a personal attack. I'm always taking it's a learning experience,
Yeah. Last week, Chris had and I think he was being serious about his own hangups with it. But we had Landis, one of our longtime listeners, comment because we were talking about Goodbye Volcano High, and Chris had mentioned that he felt like there was just something furry-ish about it. And I made the joke about him kink shaming, and it led to the point, though, that when I think about furries, right, and I think about what that means, and I think about how it's represented and how I've ever interacted with it, it's always through the lens of it being somehow sexualized. Sure. And I don't think about it in any other way because I've not interacted with it in any other way. And so Landis came and started talking about, and from what I took away from it, and Landis, please feel free to tell me more or whatever it be, but as all things are, it's a spectrum, right? It's essentially, it's really just people who are fans of anthropomorphized, animals and characters.
Stuff.
And I'm a huge fan of that, right? Sly Cooper, I love.
Dope.
And I love animated movies with anthropomorphized characters. I want to go see the new Puss in Boots so bad.
I'm hearing only great things. Yeah.
It looks phenomenal.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, let's fucking go.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So I do. I love that, right? And so to that, it's like I found, because of someone who is willing to just reach out and say, hey, the view that you just, even though I accidentally perpetrated, like I perpetuated it. Whether or not I didn't intend to,
sure.
That's how it goes, right? Media gave me this idea. I continued on it. And, the jokes about kink shaming are still whatever they are. It's still funny to mess around with that, in my opinion. But it is really nice to actually think about it and think, everyone gives this group of people a bad rap. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you right now that up until that comment, I had zero understanding of it. And somebody taking the opportunity to just say, hey, this is the flip side of it, this is what it can mean, is truly helpful to just my own worldview, right? Now when someone talks about furries, or if I see someone in a fursuit, I have a very different perspective than I would have just a week ago.
Sure.
All due to
and truthful,
one
I'll
comment.
have the same reaction and then have a deep thought. You know,
Yeah,
like
and
the
that's
initial
okay, right?
reaction.
Because that's a step. It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Yeah,
I'm getting there.
So it's interesting, but learning is all we can do, man. My
Exactly.
my daughter being as young as she is, she's 7, and we constantly talk about how, like, you never stop learning. You literally never stop. There's never a time in your life where you were too old or too far anything. You can't even be too far gone. You can always learn, and you can always change the way you feel about something, the way you act in regards to something. It just takes that first step, and it takes a bunch of very small steps after that, and eventually you can get somewhere. So I really appreciated that. So we have more news with Jedi Survivor on the horizon. Game director Stig Asmussen has come out to imply that the series will be back at least one more time. Speaking with IGN on their Unfiltered series, he states that before the first game shipped, sequel discussion was already happening at developer Respawn, while continuing to say that he, quote, always wanted to see this as a trilogy, end quote, while commenting that a third game would be safe to assume to be made in Unreal Engine 5 instead of 4, as the last 2 games have been made. Let's see, man. I keep wanting to call you Chris, and I know that you keep hearing me, but it is what it is. I'm learning that this is a habit for me. Joe.
Yes.
You were talking about eating as a Star Wars fan. Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
You were talking about eating as a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Are you super excited for Survivor?
Immediately, once I saw that there was a limited edition, I didn't even know what came inside of it. I pre-ordered it. $300.
I love that kind of dedication.
Bam.
To be fair, I'm sitting here with a life-size replica of Isaac Clarke's helmet that glows, and I spent tons of money on it. So point being, I understand. I understand deeply.
Yeah, make all of them. Cal is so beloved in the Star Wars fandom. We want him in shows. We want him in movies.
Let's do this.
Yeah. Whatever.
What's the hashtag?
Whatever it takes.
We got to share it to the audience so they can share it. You got to create it. If there's no hashtag, you have no movement. How do you think? How do you think Release the Snyder Cut came about? There was a hashtag. Damn it.
Let's do the Cal Cut. Let's do that. Hashtag the Cal Cut. No, just the Cal Cut. The Cal Cut. No. You say it fast. It could. You know what? It's 12:30 at night. I don't know.
Fair point. Let's keep going.
Every time we get crazy on the show, we just let people know how late it is at night for recording.
I love it. Yeah, anytime that we're doing the show, I just
time. It's great.
Just keeps going. Yeah.
No, I'm all in. Give me this, all of it.
Did you have any hangups on the first game? Like any complaints that you hope to see immediate? Yeah,
awful.
Yeah.
I love that he's not wearing ponchos. That's a great fix. The beard, great choice as well. He looks good now. He's looking good. Before he looked, I don't know what they were going with the poncho look. I really don't. But no, other than the map not being great, that was the best Star Wars game ever made. So let's keep making them.
Ooh, that's strong words. I do quite love it, but nostalgia tells me that the Force Unleashed is it's too good.
I mean, it's also up there.
And then also, you have both of the Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2.
Yeah.
The problem is that there's actually a lot of very good Star Wars games, and then there's also a lot of very mediocre Star Wars games.
Yeah. Terracotta Arena, all of it. I get it.
That's the life we live in. Question from Jehudi MD, one of our patrons. He says, has a game studio fallen out from your grace, even though they are doing great in general? And he points at Insomniac being his since their last batch of games. He says Marvel related specifically, they have not held his interest. And I kind of thought about this because Chris is a big Respawn fan.
Yeah.
But Jedi... whatever it was called, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Yeah. Thank you. Didn't really click with him, and he never ended up beating it. And I kind of think about it in that way. So it's a good time while we're looking at a singular developer like Respawn. Do you feel like any of them have kind of slowly but surely fallen out of your way?
Rest in peace, Blizzard. This is not because of the Activision Blizzard deal, but because I fell out of love with them. I don't know what happened between 2016 and now, but maybe it is with all the news that has come out of that studio. It makes me so sad that they're not pumping out the games that I once loved, and that the games that I did love were created under such hostile experiences. That said, the other one that comes to mind is Nintendo. Nintendo, man, y'all are something else. Because one minute I love you, the next minute I hate you, the next minute you hit me, and I'll thank you for it. But yeah, if it's not Metroid, I don't care anymore. I don't know why. If it's not Metroid or the Mario movie, I cannot get excited for Tears of the Kingdom. Can't. Yeah. I've seen nothing that gets me excited. Though I have it in my fantasy league, fantasy critic league.
Oh, but 100%, it's going to do really well. I mean,
it's going to do really well, but I have no interest.
I think one that comes to mind for me, and I think really Blizzard's a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. And I think a large part is because games have taken so much longer to make, and then they started shifting to things I have no interest in that are doing really well. Like Overwatch 1 and 2, I have zero interest in.
Same.
But I'm super excited for Diablo 4.
Yeah.
But it's like I've had to wait to actually be super interested in a game from Blizzard since Diablo 3. And, StarCraft is pretty much dead. It's like, okay.
Like I'm super excited for Diablo 4. It's just they haven't released anything in so goddamn long that it's just like,
okay.
All right. You're there. You're great, I guess. It's been a while.
I have a weird answer for this, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, huh. But I also know a few people may actually agree with me. BioWare. I think BioWare at one point in time were such an incredible developer. Yep. And then, ironically, I think they had a slew of games, and I just feel like they've kind of just started resting on their laurels. And interestingly enough, the only BioWare game I've liked at all in recent years is the one game that everyone else hates. And that was Anthem. And I'm not saying Anthem is without issue, right, but I think Anthem had an interesting enough story. It at least didn't do the Destiny 1, right? It at least had a story, and it tried to tell it. I think it had really great gameplay and a lot of promise for continued support, and it was just marred by arguably and just realistically lies about what the game was going to be. A bad support in the long run, and it didn't help that EA promised to give it Anthem 2.0 and then just shit the bed and didn't let it have its No Man's Sky moment.
Yep.
But I have zero interest in them returning to Mass Effect. I have zero interest in them returning to Dragon Age. I didn't like Dragon Age Inquisition. I don't think it's a bad game. It just didn't strike for me.
Dude, you're speaking to my soul right now. Yeah.
I haven't, and I didn't play Mass Effect 3, and I don't have a good answer for why, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
The last game I enjoyed from BioWare besides Anthem was Mass Effect 2.
Same. So
I get it. I mean, it's like he says with Insomniac. I mean, clearly everyone's loving those games, but so it's like me and Zelda. I haven't been excited for a Zelda game since A Link Between Worlds.
Hot damn.
For a new game, for like a new Zelda game.
Yeah.
I guess Link's Awakening remake I was a little hyped, but it's a remake. It's like I'm talking new. So yeah. All right, interesting. Looking up next, Sony is looking to have to pay refunds as Australian courts rule that EA's popular FIFA Ultimate Team game mode constitutes a form of gambling, given the random nature of the reward for buying packs. The damages for Sony, despite not being the publisher, is to refund £338 and 26, whatever the equivalent of cents is.
Pence. It's pence, sir.
Thank you. This will likely form some precedent in the area, which will be interesting to see play out, as many countries have for years expressed concerns with this type of content, but somehow they've largely gone unchanged all this time. So we might start seeing specifically territorial or regional variants on some of these games where they can't do that to penetrate that market.
Yeah,
it's gonna be really interesting to see. Then it makes you wonder, right? Like, so if we start seeing Australia actually change and make this, and they start doing that, where's the domino effect? Once one country sees it work and sees it go through, who's to say the next country won't go, Nope, let's go. And then nope, let's go. And I struggle with this because I don't like that type of thing, and I don't interact with it. But I would be lying to you right now if I didn't tell you that. I literally right here beside me, I bought 2 packs of Yu-Gi-Oh cards the other day. It's the exact same thing. The only difference is that this holds value in perpetuity.
Yes.
As long as there is interest in this and it physically exists, it has some value. And that is why I don't have any value in online card games. It's why I would never buy a game. Like I'd never buy cards in something like Hearthstone.
Marvel Snap.
Yeah, it's like I just can't. Yeah. Like you're not going to get money from me for something I don't own. Yeah. But I will buy card games and even take the gambling chance. Opening packs is fun because you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But I at the same time I feel like the problem here is children. The problem here is always, man, because I honestly feel like any adult should be given enough rope to hang themselves if they please.
Sure.
It's not for me to say whether or not someone should be able to buy FIFA Ultimate Team packs, even if I ultimately think it's a bad idea. I will not be the person to tell you that you can't do that. It's your money. Do what you will with it. But you know what? Your government and wherever you live can say what you can and can't do. So good luck to you if it impacts you at all. You have any thoughts on this, Joe?
No, none whatsoever. I'm kind of the same with you, man. I for the most part, like the digital trading card, microtransaction type of stuff, NFTs, Dr. Disrespect loves them. I don't. I think I literally think they're one of the dumbest concepts in the world that have very little actual useful utility.
I would say that. I don't think that like the concept of an NFT in and of itself, it's fine. I get it. I think the implementation of NFTs as a market, stupid. And the way it's been done so far has been
dumb.
Yeah, ignorant. Just I see no way in which it will work, and I think it's shown.
Elon will show us.
Not going to happen. So we'll see. But I guess I didn't put that in the news. But Square Enix's president is stepping down. So for anybody who was worried about Square and NFTs, maybe the new president coming in will correct course on that ship. If you are into NFTs and we're hoping for them in Square, I have to tell you, maybe it's
correcting a whole lot of stuff over there because it's not good.
Yeah, they're an very interesting publisher. Yeah, they make some of my favorite games of all time, and they also make some of the craziest decisions I have ever seen.
Yeah.
Maybe this shakeup is what's needed. Next up, AMD have revealed that Sony became their largest customer last year, hot off the back of increased PlayStation 5 stock and continued interest in the console, accounting for 16% of the company's revenue. That's a humble brag for Sony right there. They're doing real well, putting out numbers. And that leads us to our final piece of news. And I think, Joe, y'all probably covered this on y'all's show because y'all record slightly different. But PlayStation have revealed a collaboration with LeBron James for a limited edition custom DualSense and console cover as part of its PlayStation Playmakers initiative. This marks yet another collaboration for the two, as LeBron was also in the ads for God of War Ragnarok. The pair of accessories will be available for pre-order later this year for any interested. And I kind of wanted to use this as a moment to talk about what I think has been Sony's continued failures in offering any meaningful way of custom consoles, custom accessories that really push the envelope. And part of me looks at this and goes, so LeBron James gets to make a custom console cover and gets a custom DualSense, and yet your own first-party title in God of War Ragnarok just gets a controller, no plates. And your big third-party partnerships like Hogwarts get a controller, no plates. What is going on? Why did you even design the PlayStation with removable plates if all you're going to sell is other colored plates? You are 2 generations have gone by now.
Yeah.
And from the PS3, it started with Xbox having far more interesting collector's editions or special edition consoles. Like do you remember the R2D2 C3PO?
Oh, we had it. Are you
Star Wars Xbox 360?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Dude, it's sick. It's way more interesting than anything Sony has done, and they've continued that with they had that with the Gears of War Xbox 360 that they did. They had the gouges in it. The Halo 3 the Halo 3 one that they did for 360. Moving on, they had the Gears 4 and Gears 5 Xbox and Xbox One and Xbox One X, which were beautiful. The Gears 5 Xbox One X that had it had like an ice thing with like a skull set in behind, and it really looked like it was under ice. Incredible looking.
Yep.
And Sony was printing the Leviathan axe in flat, shiny gloss. You know what I mean? Like no texture. The Leviathan axe on the system.
They're so bad at limited editions, guys. So bad. Now that said, though. Again, so bad. The Vader PS4 is disgusting. It's so low effort. The only limited I liked was the Spider-Man one, and even that, it's like cherry red Spider-Man logo.
They had a few. I would even if you're not a fan, you should look up the Monster Hunter World PS4 Pro.
All right. It
is slick looking. The Destiny Taken King PS4. Beautiful.
Is it?
Gorgeous if you have not seen it. It is a beautiful console. And then I really feel like they kind of turned the page right there at the end because The Last of Us Part 2, when they came out with, had embossed. The fern was embossed into it where you could feel it. And I was like, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, they have their moments of like the Metal Gear Solid one's dope. They have their moments.
Kingdom Hearts 3 one, also very in-depth.
Let me see this one.
Crazy limited. And then I think like their numbered ones they did, like the 20th anniversary that I have, the 20th anniversary PS4 is beautiful, but it's simple and it's, I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's good. It's got the the 20th anniversary logo pattern of 20 triangle square XO. And it was really beautiful. I like that one. And then I had the 500 million PS4 Pro that they did. That was like the see-through purplish color. It was really cool. But few and far between when I've seen a handful, and that continues to be said of the Series X, far more interesting custom consoles.
Yeah. I will say though, this collab is important. PlayStation is really going big with its marketing budget this year. It is really impressive what they're doing and partnering up with celebrities as much as you want to eye roll at it as hardcore gamers. Super smart. Big moves here that are making outside the gamerverse to get people engaged.
And I think that's what's happening, right? Like if we're being honest, the outreach for God of War versus the outreach for LeBron James is just massively different. As much as we may look at it, all I'm asking for Sony is that if you're going to give LeBron James this opportunity to do both of these, give your own marketing internal team the ability to say, come on, let's come up with some cool God of War Ragnarok plates that have like the God, that have the Kratos' alpha symbol or whatever I can't think of, omega symbol or whatever it is, and have the Ragnarok runes etched around it. Do something, right? Yes. And have it be embossed into the plate where you can rub your fingers across it and it feels, that's cool, right?
Yeah.
Anything like that would have been cool. And then Hogwarts, dude, give me plates that have the little gold silhouette of the Hogwarts castle going off the side. That would be super cool.
Or give me controllers of the different houses.
100%, right?
Come on, it's right there. It's right in front of you. PlayStation.
Yeah. So it feels like I've continued to wait for them across 3 generations to get better, and I thought bullishly for the PS5, they're designing it with it in mind. There's no way it won't be good. And here we are 2 years in.
And alas,
I have Galaxy Red plates. I mean, I like them more than the white, I suppose, but damn.
I got purple.
All right, man. Well, that wraps out the news. I definitely want to see some bigger things coming out of theirs. You think about with what's coming, it's like, what do they have opportunities for heading up? And it's hard to say. We have Spider-Man and Wolverine on the way. Wolverine could be pretty cool. It would actually be sick if they came out with side plates that had like 3 slashes and it was actually notched out and like you can feel it going down. That would be really cool. Spider-Man's a little harder because a lot of it is like, it would be kind of crazy, but would be cool is if they found a way to emboss like the spider logo in the way that it is on, you know, the game's Peter Parker, that spider logo all the way down, and you can feel it raised up, and it has like a texture to it. It can get really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
has to be.
I may be wrong because I didn't end up getting lucky enough to get it, but I think the Kingdom Hearts 3 PS4 Pro has like leather or something weird. I could be wrong.
Okay.
But I would love to see them get that ballsy. Could you imagine if they were able to kind of get that carbon fiber print and have the spider logo be in that? That would be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be dope. PlayStation, get weird with your limited editions, for the love of God.
Let's do it, man. There's no reason not to. That brings us to rounding out the show with 2 little bitty questions.
Oh, boy.
First one comes from Rude Days 93, longtime listener, longtime patron. He says,
hello.
So I'm on day 3 of no power at my house, which sucks, but I am getting a lot of outside stuff done that's been on the to-do list for a while. So, have you guys ever had no power for multiple days, and what did you do to pass the time?
Oh, man. Hurricane Sandy, baby. We did not have power for 2.5 weeks. And I honestly don't know how I passed the time. I went to work. Like, I remember being so excited to go to work. I've never been so excited. Exactly. We had electricity. We had a generator. We had heat. It was dope. We get to charge our phones there. We didn't have to fight anybody for gas. It was beautiful. But I don't wish that nightmare on me any longer. Or on no one. So Rude Days, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you get your power back. And I hope you fight PSENG to make that happen.
Yeah, man, I tell you, back when the Texas, you know, when we had that crazy snow back in February of 21 in Texas, and it like shut down the power grid. Since I'm on the edge of Texas and technically in Arkansas, like I told you, we're that border city.
Yeah.
So Texas is right down the way, but even our part of Texas is so on the outskirts of Texas in Northeast Texas that it's not on the main Texas power grid. So none of us lost power, but we had tons of snow and the roads were awful because our roads and our tires and stuff. We don't keep gear for that because it doesn't happen. Like, you know, we don't keep tons of ice or anything like that. We don't have all weather tires because it never snows here. It's like, it would be like spending extra money on your tires for no reason. You know, it's just, it's kind of like up north. I noticed that people talk about because of the salt in the air and the salt that they have to do on the roads, the bottom side of cars get rusted out a lot quicker.
Yes.
So it's something that, you know, it's specific to the area. But we had power the entire time. I didn't go to work for a full week because we couldn't even get there. But I had power and heat and everything. So it's been a long time since I've been out without power in any meaningful capacity. So sadly, Rude Days, I hate to tell you, man, I have very little guidance to offer you. Yeah. I think the last time I can think of, it's a fun story for me. Back in high school, 9th grade, 10th grade, I modded my PSP because I was a poor boy, couldn't afford anything.
Sure.
And I modded my buddy's PSP, and we went to my mom's boss, who was a very rich family. They had a really nice, basically a mansion, closest you're going to get around here. Crazy pool with like a little waterfall coming into it. Really nice. Storm started happening while we were there. Power was out for like 4 hours. Everybody just stayed there because it made the most sense to stay there.
Sure.
But we had extra batteries for our PSPs, and we had our PSPs with us. And at the time, I was working on game development. Which I don't really mess with in any meaningful way anymore. But part of having a modded PSP, you could create homebrew games for it. And so I was trying my hand at creating a Counter-Strike clone for PSP, and I was able to get multiplayer working. So I had it to where not online multiplayer, but ad hoc, as they used to say, if you're in the same vicinity. And so the game was unfinished, like climbable and interactable surfaces had no textures because I couldn't understand what was going on. Like I'd give them textures, but I was doing it in a program called Game Maker, which is what Hotline Miami and stuff have been made in.
Yep.
So we're running around. There's ladders that are blue because anything you could interact with was blue because it was supposed to, I think what happened is it was supposed to glow blue, like have a blue outline. And I think that I just didn't understand how to make it non-opaque. But it was really funny. So we were like running around playing hide and seek in these fairly large maps, just me and him. And we spent the whole 4 hours doing that. And it was really fun.
Nice.
So I guess what I'm telling you, Days, is to mod a PSP, get just proficient enough in making games and Game Maker to make a homebrew for that of a shooter style game. And then have at least one friend. I know that's hard as an adult. Have at least one friend that's with you. And when the power goes out, you just have your horde of PSP batteries and you go for it, you know?
Or
Four simple steps.
You just go a little stir crazy and you make a game on the floor. You draw it on the wall, you know? Just go a little nuts. It's okay to go a little nuts for your days.
Yeah, you got to be careful, man, because if you start drawing stuff on the floor, creating makeshift Ouija boards.
Yeah. That's where I'm going. Summon the devil.
That's a game.
That's right. Let's get cursed.
That's the game of Risk. All right. And the last question we have here is a pretty fun one. Velvet Thunder, patron, comes in, says, which first-party PlayStation protagonist do you think you could most easily beat in a fist fight? If the answer is none, who would you have the best chance of running away from? I want to tell you right now, Velvet, you have severely underestimated the wealth of long dormant PlayStation IP from which I can pick and choose from.
Oh, go for it.
Multitude of easy answers. First and foremost, the first thing that came to my head, Spike from Ape Escape. I would throw hands with that kid any day.
True, he's a dumb idiot.
I would, he'd probably like throw a little monkey net on my head, but it wouldn't be big enough to, I got a big head. Just wanted you to know that.
Yeah, but you would be hitting a child.
I would be hitting a child, but he's a fictional child, so I would go to fictional jail, and that's not real. So.
Okay, yeah, no. Actually, I think Spike's the best example because Spike. He first off, anything for the PS1 or even PS2 generation, their movement is janky.
I'm not throwing hands with Daxter though. No, not Daxter. No. Actually, Daxter, I might throw hands with Daxter. He's an Otzel, but I'm not throwing hands with Jack.
Yeah, no, Jack's gonna kick your ass. But like Daxter, I mean, why would you? First off, he could duck out of you. Like you got to reach low to hit him in the mouth. So like, I'm really thinking Spike, because I don't like how he's staring at me. You know,
for a second, when I first read this question as I was putting it into the docket, I thought to myself, Parappa the Rapper. But then I stopped and I thought to myself, in that game, he's literally in a karate class with a dude in like a, No,
yeah, he knows how to, Parappa knows how to throw
punch, kick, side to side. I'm like, no, Parappa might, may think you can throw hands on his little 2D ass and he may fuck you up. Just throwing that out there.
I'm trying to find others, but I think Spike is probably the best. Or Zeke from Infamous. Zeke sucks.
Hey, you know what? Hold up. Zeke has a redemption arc, okay? I love Zeke. He's a bastard who did bastard things. He's a bastard-coded bastard with bastard feeling. I understand it. Mm-hmm. But by the end of everything, I got to say, I got some love for my guy. He's a cool dude. There's a scene in Infamous 2 where they talk about what he did in Infamous 1 towards the end, and it's actually a really well done scene. Having recently replayed that game to grab platinum,
I need to go back.
Dude,
I need to go back.
They need to fucking they need to remaster those games. There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. So let's flip the question on its head for a second.
Okay.
Which one would you not want to fist fight?
Kratos is going to kill me in an instant. Like we're taking our pick here. Like
fair point.
Any of these guys are killing me. I mean, Jin Sakai's going to cut my arm off instantly.
Without fail.
I mean, without fail. Aloy,
he'll poison me first, disgrace his grandfather. Yeah. But there's uncle. But you'll be good.
Aloy's going to toss me off a mountain, a cliff even. Like there's just so many ways to die there. So no, I would mess around with
the PS3 and PS4 era, it starts to get a little rough. I mean, if you move back, it's like, I've got it. The little mosquito game that they put out where you fly around as like a fly or a mosquito in the bathroom. It's a PS1 game.
Yeah, what's the main character in where they're drawing all types of fancy shit on the wall. It's 1:00 in the morning.
Concrete Genie.
concrete genie. Punch that kid in the face and punch all the dumb genies in the face. Punch the bullies in the face. No one's making it out without a punch face.
I don't know, man. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but late game, whenever you get the ability to like shoot the paintbrush out, I think it could fuck you up with that paintbrush. So it depends on when. Early hours of that game, I'd be swinging on that boy. Late hours, I might be a little worried.
Fair enough. Yeah. Final hour, maybe I'm not gonna mess with, but other than that, I'm gonna beat that kid up. Yeah.
Yeah, fair point. No, Sackboy though. Sackboy seems like you could punch him and he would just be cool with it.
Yeah.
Cause like you ever play Little Big Planets where like you just control the arms and you flick him and smack the shit out of who you're playing with? That man could take a hit.
Yeah. Honestly, might be even the unstoppable force because of how much he could take.
He reminds me of like SpongeBob, the episode where he's worried about getting hit, and then suddenly once he gets hit, he realizes it's nothing.
Yep.
Sackboy is the SpongeBob of the PlayStation universe. It's confirmed. We figured it out.
Confirmed. There you go.
Joe, I think we've solved a lot of questions, even ones that people didn't ask here today.
Ooh-wee.
I think this may be the longest podcast we've ever done.
I think so. My butt is so sore, boys.
You were going all in on the PSVR talk, so I didn't want to cut it short. This is my time. This was the opportunity.
Yeah,
you made this happen, Joe. I appreciate it.
This was a Lord of the Ring.
This was not quite an extended cut, but we're getting there.
We're getting there.
All right, Joe, as I always do for any guest we may have on the show, I will offer you the opportunity. If there is a community's take question you would like to pose to our audience, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I will take the reins if you would prefer.
Please, you take the reins. It's 2:30 in the afternoon now.
If we keep going, it's going to be like 4 years in the future.
I know.
I mean, hey, you know what? Maybe that's time travel. We're figuring it out slowly but surely.
Time is an enigma, Brett.
It is an enigma. Guys, I think that what we're going to reach out and ask to you guys, and this is going to be, part of it is, what do you think people will actually reasonably interact with in good faith? So part of me would love to actually dig a little deeper and see what you guys think about some of the Final Fantasy controversy and other things. But that feels like putting that on Twitter is signing a death warrant for anybody.
That's right.
So let's say this. What is the one custom console, custom skins, custom controller, combo, wombo that you want to see from PlayStation with any of their upcoming or legacy games that you'd like to see? Because, I
love that.
PlayStation could easily do a retro line where it's just a bunch of PlayStation 1 themed things. And that would be really cool. And I'm sure a lot of people would be into it. So that will be the question. You guys tell us what you would like to see. Joe, once more, thank you for joining me. Every time that we get together, somehow it ends up being an incredibly long thing. But I have a good time every time. So from the bottom of my heart, great time tonight. I will be tired at work tomorrow and think to myself, I had a good time. It was worth it. So
yeah, I'm walking over to my bed and I am taking a snooze. Let me tell you.
I guarantee it. All right, Joe. For everyone who wants to find you, remind these people where they can get your lovely voice in their lovely ears.
Yeah, you can find me. And first off, thanks for having me. Again, it's always a blast getting to record with y'all. Because we even before the show, we had like a 2-hour conversation. It was great about life and stuff. It was great. It was great.
It only makes it worse that we've gone almost 4 hours, but I know. Go for it.
It's whatever. You can find me over at the Trophy Room, a PlayStation podcast made by the players for the players, where each and every Thursday, me and my best friend Kyle talk about the latest, the greatest in all things PlayStation. You can find our show over on the Trophy Room show on YouTube. You can find the Trophy Room on whatever podcast service you have currently, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your RSS feed of choice. We are there. And if we're not, you let me know and I will fight Apple. I will fight whoever is making it not happen. I'll fight for you.
At the doorstep. I will go to Apple's doorstep. Tim Apple. Damn it.
Listen here.
Yeah.
But no, thank you once again for having me. This was fantastic. You can find me over also at Mr. Badbit on Twitter, where sometimes I say funny things.
Yeah, man, you got to self promote. It can't just be the podcast. You got to self promote. Well, Joe, once again, thank you. If you are still listening to this and you do not know who we are, first and foremost, thank you for riding this ride with us. If you want to keep following us, consider liking the video, subscribing if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on your favorite podcast service, give us a follow. If it allows you to do a rating, give us a rating. It lets people know whether or not we are worth your time or their time. And last but certainly not least, you can find us on all of our social media, Triangle SQRD over on Twitter. Like I said, there's a Facebook group, Triangle Square to PlayStation Podcast. And in the link below in the description, whether you're watching, listening, or what have you, you can find our Discord. One final thing to get this show finally behind us. We want to thank all of our patrons who have reached out, went to patreon.com/Nartech, gave us a little as $1 per month. It's a huge help. As Joe can attest, Patreon is a big reason that a lot of homegrown podcasts can even happen. So we always wrap the show up by giving a big shout out to all of our patrons until the list gets too long to make that reasonable. But for now, it's not that long. So shout out to Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, It's a Sin to Win, aka Sean, Aztec King, Lecheon69, The Lord Corgi, Salvador Garcia, Hamadegger, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Christopher, Danny Villalobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Donovan Williams, Constantly Kenny, Matthew Green, and Sean Sanderud. Thanks to each and every one of you. We'll be back next week.